All right, guys. So we let me hit refresh on Twitch. Cool. So we just went live. We're gonna have people start to come in at some point, I'm sure, or not. Who knows? But for people watching the VOD or watching YouTube, what we're doing tonight is really different than anything we've done to date. We're going to do like a series of screen shares back and forth. You'll be seeing them. That'll give you an idea a little bit about, it'll give you some insight into how we typically work. We do a lot of screen sharing back and forth, and with Slack, we can write on the screen and give each other feedback and stuff. And we're usually tabbing through documents and looking at all sorts of well, even if it's concept art, we may be drawing on it and stuff. So you get a little bit of insight into how we work as a team, being fully distributed. And you'll see us, everything that we're doing is going to be in real time. It'll be a discussion about the layout of the city. That's going to utilize a mix of Pattis / Harrison's screen. He's in there basically relaying everything out right now. And some of the layout that we're basing this off of that Ham gave us. And yeah, so this is Night Harbor. You've been looking at it for ever since it was just a box and some flat sand about 1.5 years ago. And so this is the working towards actual production mock-up. So starting with very sort of a gray box kind of build out so that we can start to play with proportions and make sure that all of these incredible, wonderful ideas fit in there, which now that I see the scale, they should. And then we'll go from there. So yeah, tell you what, I think that's enough of intro for VODs. Hey, Zukan. And then I'll also make it so that chat pops up here on occasion for you folks that like to see the chat in VODs. You may or may not be able to read it depending on what's going on. And yeah. And there may be times where you know what? I'm not going to mute myself when you guys are talking, when I'm talking to chat, because otherwise we'll be talking over each other on the VOD. I just realized. So apologies for that, team, but this is how we do. Cool. So you guys, go ahead and get ready to keep going. Hey, Regis, I had a good day yesterday. Like I said, Jasmine got home from work and she needed to get some stuff out, and I had to be the loving and supporting husband. So I skipped the stream. Sorry, guys, but we wound up having a good evening, and we got some good resolution. So, hey, Dram. Cool, man. You guys, you want to keep working?
Hey guys, how's everybody doing?
Yeah, can you hear them? Hey, Sakash. Oh, and you guys can see chat as well, right? I mean, it's not like
yep. Yeah, I have chat open up over here. Yeah, over on my other screen, so I can see what everybody's typing if I remember to look over.
I cannot, on the other hand. Hold on a second. Maybe let me log on to Twitch.
Hey, Snow.
You guys hear me okay first of all?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Fantastic.
I tried to get you guys relatively the same level. So we're using Discord for voice so that you can look in the top left and see who's talking. And we're using Slack, our usual tool, Slack huddles for tool. Ham just got his Twitch up. So that we can mark on people's screens until it stops working. I don't know why it stops working sometimes, but
you all set, Ham?
I think I am.
Awesome.
I've got Twitch muted, and we should be okay. All right, good. Is the sound still okay, or is my setup interrupting or disrupting anything?
Sounds good on my end.
They sound good to me.
All right.
So we were kind of talking just before the stream about these structures over here, and Ham was mentioning the idea of potentially bringing it over here as well. Well, I need to remember that I have to keep toggling this on and off because I keep trying to move.
Yeah.
And my my pen's attached. But yeah. So the idea. Oh, Ham, why don't you talk about what the idea of this kind of district and area is, and we can kind of go from there.
And
Sure.
let me know whenever you want me to bring up the map.
Sure. In fact, let me before I talk about this district, let's kind of talk about the context of what we're doing right over here. So we kind of landed in a place where we started discussing fine tuning Night Harbor, maybe rebuilding it from the ground up, as you can see. And so what I kind of set off to do was to kind of figure out Night Harbor conceptually. This time, taking in a lot of the lore that we've been doing. Now, you know, I don't stream like the rest of the team, so a lot of the stuff that I do is kind of like hidden in the background, if you will, right? But what we've been progressing in sort of over the last couple of months is a very, very deep dive into the lore of M&M. And so, you know, we've got our races set up. We've got, you know, a whole bunch of factions set up. We have the history of Night Harbor kind of laid out as well and outlined. And so now we decided to work that lore into the design of the city and make it feel like it really represents what we're trying to more or less achieve. And so given that, it meant that we had to revisit the structure of Night Harbor. And so that's what we kind of set out to do. Now, the process or the approach that we took to doing that, first of all, was number one, let's kind of look at it in terms of districts and zoning and things like that. And we had to resolve a lot of design challenges, both on the narrative and the sort of game experience front on that level. And so what ended up happening, is you may have seen on Harrison's stream, is he kind of used a layout that I had done, that I really just roughed up over a couple of hours, what do you call it, to act as the basis or the foundation for the new city layout, if you will, right? The thing is, the zoning is that what you can see there is kind of like the rough zones. But what this map does not take into account is scale and proportion. So basically, how big? So to answer the questions of how big is each area, like when you look at Old Temple Complex, you know, is it really that wide? And no, these are representational boxes. They're meant to be there to kind of indicate a rough sort of well, to indicate the zone, essentially, nothing more, nothing less, not to actually indicate its scale or size or things like that, right? So since then, what you're looking at right now is not only the same representational, you know, it's an abstraction of those zones, but also what's in them. And what's in them is what's going to communicate potentially the scale of the place. And so essentially what will end up happening after this exercise, after we've kind of, you know, addressed it, and that's going to be part of our discussion today. We're going to address these things and say, like, okay, well, when we talk about a temple to so-and-so god, you know, how big is it? You know, if we talk about a shop, how big is it? How many of them are in that zone, etc., and so forth. Subsequent to that, we'll start readdressing the zone map, this time with attention to scale and proportion. And we may revisit the topography as well of Night Harbor to kind of create a little bit more tiering, a few more kind of like visually interesting areas, well, visually and physically more interesting areas to traverse in part of your play experience. So that's going to be the next stage, I believe. But for today, we have the same abstraction that we've got in place, and we're going to be taking a look at some of the bits and pieces kind of in there. So I don't know if you want me to jump back into Harrison's earlier question about, you know, talking about that park district that you know, he was kind of pointing out, or if you want to kind of lead into the conversation sort of in a slightly different way, Shawn.
No, I think you guys, honestly, we're just doing work, right? Like we're not doing a presentation or a demo or anything. We needed to do this work anyways. And this is how we work behind the scenes, as I said, at the sort of the lead in for the VOD. So let's just keep working. You know, folks in chat, if people come into chat and they're kind of like, oh, what's this or whatever, feel free to let them know. And every once in a while we'll stop and sort of do the usual thing where I repeat myself. But yeah, let's just keep at it. Hey, Cathadian, Droop, what's up? Lord Sacrum, BDC. So, hey.
Hey guys. So yeah, we were kind of talking about the park here, which when I started building this, Hamad just mentioned, you know, that it was gonna be kind of like a recess down here, and I ran into a design problem just kind of running through the elevations that we were talking about, because we wanted this area to be higher, that we had this, you know, this hill, this ramp, and it left this giant kind of just open space right here. So again, very rough. You know, these scales and stuff are adjusting, like constantly. But you know, kind of the idea maybe adding in some like hanging gardens.
Yeah. Well, and I was about to say, we had talked about when we looked at the Goblin concept from before, there was a bit of layer or level 2 over level 1. You know, the stuff that you built up where you could walk up to one building and go to the next thing. And I'm wondering, so are we still considering having some overhang? Because we had talked about that for hanging gardens. And then it's cool to have that sort of built into the elevation. And then my other question, sort of before we started, was talking about the, you know, from a distance in order to create the skyline that we need, how we handle the elevations, especially when we're talking scale, because this thing's, you know, it's funny seeing it now. It's so huge.
It's gigantic.
That we may have the opposite problem of what I thought, which was the footprint's too big. And so we may need to consider how to potentially scale down a bit to where we can still have the wonderful, you know, skyline, multi-tiered skyline at a distance, in sort of that sense of, you know, epic, leading up to that epic look, without this being like just a massive amount per tier. You know what I mean? Does that make sense? Sort of compacting it?
Yeah. I also think just adjusting this shape is going to help a little bit, because right now I haven't really thought of how you transition into that second tier. You know, are we going to have some of those overhangs like from Goblin had been mentioning with one of his designs, where, you know, you've got the little bridges over, or, you know, is this a gate over here, or do we do like an extrusion? Let me let that clear.
Well, while you're letting that clear, when we look at the like the various reference that we've seen in like that you got in Pure Ref and stuff, and sorry I didn't download the biggie that you shared today.
Oh, you're fine.
When we look at kind of that that sprawl up in elevation, where there's natural, where it's not difficult to see how this stairwell leads to that stairwell leads to this other thing, and next thing you know, you've got a nice difference in elevation, right? In all of those sprawls, whether it was Paglia or whatever it's called in Italy, or we're looking at any of the Middle Eastern stuff, or, I mean, even if you look at the way favelas go up the hills in Brazil, kind of hitting that in natural sort of, if I were to walk through from the very bottom, through gates and all the way up, I could get up here without it having to be like, you know, a weird like spiral staircase or an elevator or some shit. You know what I mean? Just make it more natural. Yep, exactly.
So like this one. Oh, and I don't have control. But yeah, exactly. And I'm thinking that kind of stuff will work pretty well, especially over in, you know, kind of running up this hill. Potentially, if we want to have buildings running along the edge of this, or, you know, I have a kind of a ramp over here to some degree, and right here. I was also playing kind of with the idea of building almost from the top tier down in this giant, which was just a giant like valley almost,
right,
right there. So, you know, having buildings that are higher and then kind of tiering them down, almost like a giant apartment complex of various little bits. And again, this is all just super rough. These ones right here are based on dimensions that were kind of proved out with this structure. And then kind of taking those into account and just adding, you know, another 5 meters on each top, or on top of that, for more and more levels, essentially, is what I did.
One thing that I'm curious about, and Aurora Bros, thank you for the Prime, is if we were to zoom back out, or basically up, and then look at it similar to when we're looking at, you know, this
from the map.
Yeah. One thing that I'm curious about is, now that we see buildings in there to scale, essentially. We have a better idea of if we were to basically go to the map and do something as simple as count the sort of known structures, right? And we were like, all right, we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, roughly. And then we, oops, I think I could probably even close this now. And then we were to sort of mark, because I've done some pretty crude things like this in the past, just really simply where you've got these areas demarcated, which is great, and then we just kind of look at what does that look like. Then the then we can get a feel, and we're like, oh, like with this one, 17 seemed like a lot when Ham sent me that document earlier. I was like, oh my God, how are we going to fit all this into Night Harbor? But at least then I started thinking about it, I was like, okay, but if we also want all the player housing in here and stuff, then yeah, you know, it'll look like some of that ref. It'll just be, well, most buildings will have purpose. We put this in here. If we look and we're like, you know what, 17 buildings in here, really, it fills this area sort of comfortably. Then we can talk about, is the overall, like as we start to do this, is the overall footprint too epic, right? Do we want to bring in the shoreline or mountains or whatever? And you know where I'm heading, right? I can stop rambling.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense to me. And you know, even just having these little buildings over here that we can be like, okay, one of these squares is essentially about the size of a building. You can fill this space up fairly quickly. The only place, as I've been kind of looking around, is you know, right around here. Does that need more space? Considering, you know, there's a in Ham's document there, it lists an inn. Currently, this was the scale of, you know, that rough out of the inn, so it has a fairly large footprint. Obviously, we can make inns smaller, but if we want it to be, you know, a gathering place,
yeah,
where 50 people kind of hang out in this area, that takes up, you know, a large portion of that footprint.
I like it. I mean, you know, if we've got the room, then let's not compromise on the functionality. And sorry if you hear my dog whining in the background. Jasmine's at work dinner, so he's being a doof. To answer 2 quick questions, let's see. Regis asked, odd question, I'm sure, but does the sub money from the streams get pumped back into the game? Yep, all except for, well, before we were even working on the game. Hey, thank you very much for resubbing, Monty. 6 months, Aaron 3 months. So to answer your question, yeah, essentially it does, but please don't sub for that reason. I appreciate every sub that you send over, and you know, basically we have pretty low overhead. We pay for like Slack and all this other, like our software that we're using and things like that. Just pump it in there, that's fine. But Twitch keeps 50% of it. So we're working on getting our merch shop up, which even then, I mean, only so much is profit. But, you know, we'll have other means in the future for you to support us. But we definitely appreciate it. And yeah, we're talking about the body pillow. Don't worry.
Same thing with anybody who has subscribed to mine. I plan on putting all of it into just licenses and stuff that I have to pay anyways to be able to use the software. Oop, hold on a minute. There we go. But yeah. So I think scale wise, you know, I wasn't quite sure if some of these areas were going to be too small or too large, and a lot of this is, you know, I scaled this based off of the old Geo, which is still, you know, still in here. So, you know, just up to here is essentially the space we've been able to run around in previously.
Oh, wow. I love that. I love being able to see the old stuff.
Yeah. I wanted to keep it there so we can go back and forth and look at it as we go.
Cool.
Sorry, I didn't mean to talk over you there.
No, you should, because I blab and blab.
But yeah, so I mean, you know, all this stuff really, where, you know, going back, is all a new portion of a zone essentially. And then, you know, just some little, you know, really placeholdery flavor elements based off of stuff that Ham was talking about as well.
Okay.
Yeah, I can bring back the actual terrain too.
Another thing that'll end up happening as we sort of revisit this, because like I said, the original map was kind of was an abstraction of the zones, right? But I think the zones in effect, or the zones in reality, will end up looking a little bit more organic and less angular than they are laid out right now, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah,
you know, that's something that's very likely going to happen.
Yeah, that's what I was starting to play around with over here, was giving it a little bit more, you know, it's still rigid, but more organic in terms of it's not just one solid wall line, and added a couple, you know, towers over here. But again, this is a lot of this stuff. Goblin will probably, he wants to do some paint overs. So as we throw the geo in, he can come in and, you know, draw out what we want this to actually look like. You know, this is really just representational of like, oh, we could have the hanging garden idea over here, and then, you know, I can duplicate it over here and mirror it and see how we like that. And then does that cause an issue with, you know, if we mirror it over here, am I just moving the issue that I had when this wasn't here? Am I just moving that over here? Because now this wall has this big piece, you know, that's kind of nothing going on, or is it, you know, does it wrap around? There's some sort of geo wrap around in some way to kind of make that feel a little bit nicer.
So that we don't necessarily throw him off when he starts looking at that, could we go ahead and shrink this as soon as possible, like low?
Yeah, we could do that literally right now.
Yeah, that's how I was gonna.
So let me bring this down by 4s. So every time it snaps is basically like a story's worth of elevation that I'm taking off.
How big is the story, Harrison?
It's so interior wise, 4 meters. Exterior wise, it's about 5. Because of the little like half meter of space that we've been giving on the roofs, and then the floor itself takes up about half a meter as well, a quarter to a half a meter, and so depending on the structure. Got it.
As I'm kind of watching you do this, and I'm kind of thinking in the background as well about the tiering of the city, and you know what kind of hit me, if I may, just a moment. Hold on a second. Let me go to that screen where I can actually doodle on. Harrison, I'm sorry. I know you're kind of working on the stuff. When you're done with it, do you mind zooming back a bit?
Yeah. Am I anything particularly you want to look at?
And then go low again. Go a bit low so that we're looking a little bit more head on at the city. Yeah. All right. So I think in something that can contribute to the solution of basically satisfying the tiering design that we want is to actually play off these textures in the elevations. So what I mean by that is the escarpment essentially up here is essentially this. It's this type of mountainous terrain. And I think we can actually benefit from playing into the fact that the natural terrain is part of the city. So instead of having kind of like this desert field that stretches all the way back, kind of back and up, if you will, instead kind of it basically slams right into more mountainous terrain kind of up here. You know what I'm saying? There's dips and valleys kind of in there. And so if just allowing this stuff to clear for a moment. So in terms of like, let's say a character journey, when you enter the city, you're entering at desert level. But then there's these crags basically that take you up to the first tier of the escarpment, and then there's another tier kind of up here, and another tier that kind of goes up there, and you can fit into the valleys. There's bridges kind of spanning the tops of these valleys as well, and then you also have elevation created by buildings, right, as well. Yep. And these are interconnected, kind of going back. So I think in summary, what it comes down to is a question of just revisiting the topography really quick, and instead of kind of working on sloping horizontal planes, it's throwing escarpments and mountainous textures in there, and then building the city kind of on top of that. And I have an idea for it, Harrison, that I think you might be able to sort of execute. Well, sorry, not that you wouldn't be able to execute it, but what I mean is, no, what I meant was that you'd be able to kind of it'll probably be a stronger foundation to build off of, instead of like these sloping horizontal planes, and then trying to figure out, well, how do I sort of now force the elevations onto this, right? I think we could potentially pre-build the elevations in there.
Yeah, because it feels like you could just sort of select where we want to start, like an elevation. And I don't know how ProBuilder works relative, but yeah, and it's almost just like, what I don't know. Yeah,
I can just move
extrude
it up like that.
or
I can extrude it up. I having it as a ProBuilder mesh has actually been very nice for just real quick prototyping this out. For those particular reasons. But yeah, and I mean that I think this was an extrusion. I just kind of started working this way to some degree, but I agree. I think having more of a rocky area over here, and I initially had deleted. Oops, if I'm in object mode, I had deleted these edges, and I was going to bring in some and I don't have them in this one. Some of the newer cliff faces, and break them up and see how they worked kind of as an edge along there. But I think adding in more elevation tiers and just breaking up portions of this is going to go a long way. Also, I just threw the desert material on here just for an idea of what it looked like, so it wouldn't be this the tiny, because for the terrain I don't really need the meter marks on there. For this part, because we want to do stuff with it, I've left it on there for now. But even if this was rock, I probably would have this material on there for a bit.
You've lowered that one tier. Could you lower the second one as well?
Yeah, I started doing that and then I got sidetracked. So let's see.
That was our fault.
That's okay. Yeah, my brain switched tracks on me there.
So one thing that we haven't mentioned yet is part of what we're going to be doing here is we're also expanding Shaded Dunes and doing a bit of a redesign on Shaded Dunes proper. So it's going to be much bigger, basically between where you see those mountains now that we're peeking through. Those are new. And so basically that ridge line there will break up Shaded Dunes from the newbie yard that's on the other side, and Night Harbor. And the newbie yard's a decent chunk of the original Shaded Dunes. And then this is, if I had to guess, looking at the map that Nick was doing, at least 4 to 7 times bigger, but I may be crazy. It's bigger. We'll figure that part out as we go through.
But yeah, so this will get it probably all extended and moved. These are just placeholder, but they are newer mountains here. And then real quickly brushed in shore.
Yeah.
Which is probably going to end up being, maybe a little bit more out here, and then and then extend.
So we'll be playing with that separately, but
yeah, it's been really just kind of, my focus right now has just been kind of getting, how does the scale work? How does this feel? Actually, now that we brought this down, how does this feel? This actually works probably better for this being like an entrance way to get into the second tier. Maybe want to bring that up.
I mean, it just feels like this is already a natural, like, if we've got this transition here, this to me just feels like second tier. You know what I mean? Like this is the second tier. If it transitions, and again, I think the trick will be us making these transitions feel natural and maintaining the nice elevations. And it's interesting for us. We keep I wonder if other games come in and they're constantly scaling up to make stuff more epic, and we're constantly looking at our scale and going, how do we scale this down even more to make it feel a bit more like a bit cozier and tighter and more sort of fantastically real instead of video game ginormous. There's a question at some point, if you scroll up, Ham, BDC Retro asks, can you talk about the challenges of drawing a layout for a zone when factoring in the way the residents would build their city versus the needs of the game, in parentheses, mechanics, guild masters, blacksmiths, etc. And when we're going through the map especially, we could probably talk even more on that, but you guys...
Sure. That's a fantastic question, because that's exactly our challenge right now, right? Summed up very succinctly in that question. So in terms of like creating a layout for the city, you know, there's no right or wrong way to do it. I'll just talk about kind of like the way that I like to do it. And for me, it's, you know, when you world build, you're world building to solve problems, right? And here the problems are kind of like twofold. One of them is narrative driven, and the other one is game design driven. And so I had to make a decision, you know, sort of in my own mind, that one, the narrative should drive some of the thinking behind the design of the city. But the design, and then, you know, in parallel to that, the design of the city should also solve for gaming experience problems as well, right? So to answer your question more directly, when I think about sort of zoning, right, in terms of the abstract kind of areas and districts of the city, again, without kind of attention to scale and things like that, but I think of it more in terms of what districts would be there given who built the city and when, and what it was built on, what was there before, you know, and answering these questions, that gives me an idea of what kind of districts and neighborhoods would be in the city. And, you know, then you add sort of like another layer of problem solving to that, which is, how do I make them thematically interesting, and how do I make them kind of, you know, what gaming kind of issues am I trying to solve for this? You know, are there class trainers here? Are there vendors here? What do those vendors actually serve functionally in the game? So when you're thinking about things like that, you don't really take into account things like scale and streets and specifics. What you think of is basically lists. So that's why, like, I created those boxes, if you will, and they're meant to be an abstraction of that zone. And then I plugged in a bunch of things that I knew needed to be there. These are the absolute must-have things in there, right? And then on top of that, you also layer on, well, what other points of visual interest can I add in there? And you know, how do I make it look kind of great? How do I let the theme of that area kind of speak for itself as well? And so that's where you get into things like points of interest and landmarks and stuff that's more, let's say, uniquely aesthetic to the specific biome or environment that you're building. In this case, Night Harbor as a sort of bustling metropolis, right, in the age of discovery. Now, on the other hand, the next layer to that is to, once you've kind of identified all of these things, is to actually start working on a layout. And I think that your question is actually a fantastic segue, what do you call it, to something I want to sort of propose to the team. But let me just make sure I've satisfied your question completely first.
And as an extension of that question, Monty was asking, how much does the probable utility of the geography come into play when designing the level against pure story/gameplay utility? Like elevation was mentioned earlier, but I was thinking, what's the utility? Does the town have a caste system where like the laborers on the lower elevations of the city, or is it just for looks? And that naturally evolved from a terrace geography that's too hard to terraform flat. So yeah, it's funny. We've talked a lot about all of those elements, and it's evolved over time. And as we've developed the story, that's evolved more as well. And Ham, I'll let you get into it, but essentially there are a couple factors here. So essentially, when you're asking like, is it, you know, part of a caste system, and I think some of that naturally evolves based off of, you know, you see it in real world, based off of sort of the perceived quality of the space and, you know, elevation and all of that stuff. But we've also got a lot of history here. So we're talking a lot about the fact that the city's built on certain terrain, but the city's also built on a lot of history and previous civilizations. So there's a couple things going on there. How it's used today, how it was used before, what the topography is like. So, Ham?
So, and to add to that, so everything Shawn said is exactly spot on. And then to add to that, again, when you look at it from a design perspective, right? At the end of the day, what we're creating is something that's basically that people are meant to experience. And so all the lore in the world, all the lore that we kind of come up with has to service the game at the end of the day. And so when it comes to even things like the topography and what the city is built on, and in terms of both the let's say natural terrain and the history of the place, it's got to be factored into the design from a narrative perspective, but ultimately tempered with keeping the gaming experience in mind as well, right? So when we talk about, like, say for example, caste systems and social stratas of various kinds, the various sort of narrative factions that we have in here. All of that has been pretty much identified or is a work in progress in being identified at the lore level. Like the basic, spokes are already there. It's just some of them need to be fleshed out. But that would be our starting point. But at the end of the day, as we actually implement or rather execute those designs in the terrain's topography, as we sort of execute it in terms of how the individual districts kind of lead into each other, we have to always be mindful that it's got to serve the gameplay experience without diluting the narrative sort of foundation behind all of that, right? So that's kind of how it goes. The two points more or less go hand in hand, and they create kind of this push-pull effect as we start exploring it, right? So it's like you build the narrative, you build the environment to support the narrative. You ask yourself the question, have we actually done that in an effective or an efficient way? Cross-check yourself, make modifications, and then just keep asking questions like that. So that's the push-pull effect that ends up happening. So, narrative design leads, if you will, environmental design, and then the environment as well kind of dictates the narrative design. That's the back and forth that, we end up going through. And the idea to resolve the gaming challenge or the gaming experience challenge, it's like, where do we sit, where do we land at the end of that? Have we basically achieved the, have we not run amok with our ideas so much that we've diluted the gaming experience now, basically, right? That's the ultimate barometer for all of this.
Yeah, and one of the things that we haven't mentioned in this stream yet, but one thing to keep in mind as we're looking at the scale and some of the features that are in here, and you're thinking of the utility of the map, so generally speaking, is when this is designed, if you look, we've got some redacted stuff. Sorry about that, but we don't want to spoil everything too quickly. This map or this city isn't a starting city. We've said that a number of times. We don't want to make starting cities of any of our cities. We want to make cities, and we want them to maintain their relevance and their value as both social hubs, but also gameplay spaces for the life of the product. And the other thing that we want to do is actually provide like some gameplay space within our cities. Like you can go into districts and they are, depending on your faction or depending on what's going on, combat spaces, depending on your level. It may be more of a newbie yard feel, whereas once you're higher level, you're just watching some newbies go around and clearing, rats and bats and stuff for an actual purpose. And yeah, so think about that fact when we're going through a lot of this stuff. It is not just the place where you bank and you go to a temple or you go to your trainer. It's actually it's a gameplay space, and it will be used as a gameplay space over time. So it may change. It may, you may see some of that content shift. Some events pop off, that sort of stuff.
The other thing I'd add to that as well, if you don't mind,
Please do.
to complete kind of like the response to Montresor, right? Deliberate design is something that I believe in very strongly. So as a world builder, that will reflect constantly in the work that I contribute to M&M. And so what I mean by deliberate design, guys, is even if something feels incidental during the gameplay experience, there was rhyme and reason behind it during the development and planning process. So creatures that you encounter, places that you go to, the way things more or less look, mark my words, there's rhyme and reason steeped in lore behind all of that. Like there are allowing for a couple of happy accidents, to use the immortal words of the best afro in the history of mankind, Bob Ross. What do you call it? Happy accidents can happen here and there, but most of this is going to be deliberate design, even what may feel incidental. And that's, again, part of the gaming promise that we want to deliver with Monsters and Memories. We want to basically make sure that people can discover things, and that, people who want to engage with their environment and engage with the lore start connecting things that are not overtly expressed. Like if you're, I don't know if I should give this example. Okay, let me let me make the example slightly more vague, but hopefully clear. Excuse the contradiction in terms. Let's say you're fighting creature A, or you encounter creature A in one of the areas over here. There's something behind that, because you'll end up, there's a reason why that creature is there. There's a reason why that building looks the way that it does. There's a reason why this little place that you enter that seems almost random on the map is there. That stuff has been taken into account in our lore. So one of the promises that I'm really conscientious about fulfilling is that there's rhyme and reason to everything being there. The lore is very, very rich. Very, very rich. And I'm a devil for details, you know what I'm saying? So, and I love that stuff. I've got the patience to actually sit there and meticulously go through a lot of micro details. And so that's something that hopefully will be reflected in the game as well.
And it's funny because we have multiple points of I would say healthy tension, because Ham's so meticulous on that, where I'm often like, this seems like it'd be really cool, but why? I don't know, dude. It just seems cool. Like, this is just, we'll figure that shit out later. We'll have 20 years to eventually spell it out. It's just like, all right, so, well, but let's work on that. And so I think there's that aspect of it, which has been fun. And then I think so much of your background in tabletop and the pen and paper design approach, and just sort of the experience and the library that you have to pull from, then mixing in where I think I have a tendency to picture other games, or I'm like, what I mean, it's this nice fresh take on a number of things, where we may come from it with just a more MMO angle, and then you're coming at it more with the the pen and paper angle, and I think that helps a lot.
I completely agree. And I think it's a very healthy dynamic that we have as well, actually, because I mean, Shawn and I have fantastic conversations where, again, we go through this push-pull, Shawn will, using his exact same example, where he'll say Ham, I think this is really cool. And I'm like, okay, well, why do you think it's there? And he's like, I just think it's cool. But, let's work on X, Y, Z and just plug this thing in there. And I'm like, I'm down for that. I'm totally down for that. But in the background there somewhere, I am now fabricating a reason for why that's there and tying it into all the lore that we've already created. The stuff that's been canonized, sort of thing, right?
Yeah.
So that's kind of how it ends up working out. I guess, I don't know. I guess to use kind of a corporate term, the quality control, if you will, right? So again, I don't believe in sort of arbitrary creation. I believe in deliberate design. I believe in the Chekhov's gun approach. If you introduce something, then use it. You know what I'm saying? It's there for a reason. Double down on it. Make sure that reason is interesting. And if players are astute enough to actually make that connection, props to them. That's the idea. That means that I've done my job right. Basically, that's how I kind of feel about it. But yeah, we go through this back and forth all the time. The number of ideas that we have come up with is obscene. Right now we're trying to bring the proof of concept zone to life, which is way beyond Night Harbor. And Night Harbor is a mouthful in and of itself. But you know what? The lore of Shaded Dunes is really rich, and then around the corner there's the POC zone. But we have lore that spans the continent already.
Yeah,
we have stuff in here that'll carry us forward for a good 5, maybe longer, 5 years or more, in terms of Even the
just trying to
expansions.
get it done. The interesting thing is we haven't discussed lore really. Like we'll occasionally let a little something slip. And so there's a question of like, are you guys working on the world? What are you doing for lore? So we are currently, poking tonight at Night Harbor, the redesign. This is just one zone essentially of, I think at this point 8, 9 or so. We have a whole region basically. And so the region is something that we're working on behind the scenes as well. We're just not showing it tonight. See you, Monty. Thanks again, buddy. And so we'll be going through a similar process as this with those. We've got high level ideas and points of interest blocked out and things of that nature. But when you look at a lot of these names, like if you look at the Langsdorfian League or Thorns of the Bloom or the Nawakla Council, Torellian Mission, the Arcani, East Tem Freebooters, all this stuff that's over here on the right that are, basically listed out as things that we're discussing as we're blocking out Night Harbor. Those span the continent. They are all rooted in lore that we've been developing. We understand their histories. I'm not going to say we've got the entire history mapped out, but we understand the big beats going back to sort of the creation of the planet. And that will emerge over time. But what we're hoping is that most of that is stuff that you discover while playing a game, not that we write up a bunch of big sort of stories and spoilers and histories and stuff for you to read on the website or anything like that. It's much better that you experience it firsthand and discover it.
Yeah, and the other thing is also like the promise of the rest of the continent and its potential is kind of alluded at in the POC zone as well. So as you kind of start playing the different races that are around, you'll get an insight, if not an absolutely spelled out crystal clear view, but you'll get an insight as to what they are as a race, where they fit in the grand scheme of things in the world, and ideally, it won't cannibalize from the experience of actually playing in their respective cities, like later on as we kind of create expansions and things like that. So hopefully what the POC zone will deliver is it's a human-dominated sort of area. Essentially, Night Harbor is a human city, but there is representation and sort of variety in the lore in there that reflects the rest of the races as well. It's an ambitious undertaking, but it's one that we're conscientious of, and I hope anyway that we'll be able to satisfy it. Actually, pretty confident we will, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, because a lot of what we discuss as we're talking about the ideas and things are just the logistics of being able to deliver it. So we're looking at proof of concept as how do we create something that's both compelling and shows you the future of Monsters and Memories, but also is not a sort of pie in the sky, like, wouldn't it be cool if we did all this stuff? Instead, it's rooted in, based on our understanding of what we've been capable of doing so far and what we think it's going to take to build the rest of this. Is this reasonable? Is this something that we can continue to build out and hit that goal of trying to get folks in and playing with us this year? And what does that mean? How much of it will be available then? That's one of those things that will just, as we go, we'll figure it out. But everything down to like the level of fidelity of an object that we make is essentially there's consideration for our ability to maintain our momentum and deliver this game at scale in a timely fashion, and then figure out sort of our next steps beyond proof of concept in terms of building out the rest of our world.
Shawn, a thought just came to me actually as to maybe a meaningful exercise we could do now, because I see Harrison kind of building away there in the background. So to create context for the exercise, it seems to me that the topography of Night Harbor needs a sort of revisit, right? To create kind of like the tiering and the sort of Yeah, the escalation, basically, the tiering levels, right? Why don't we go to the Traveler's Ward over here, block it out with a wall using the road map that we have, the road flow that we have, and actually start plonking in some of these buildings with their respective sizes. It's on sand level, it's on ground level, essentially, right? And when we see all these elements kind of side by side next to each other, it'll communicate how much space we have, what kind of negative space we have, and that might actually resonate and translate to the other districts as we start filling them out later.
Cool.
That's fine with me.
Yeah, and there's a lot of stuff to plonk there. And how do you want to do that, Harrison? Do you want to just take some of the? Is it easier to use the white blank buildings?
I can just really easily box stuff out. I mean, if we have a general, so the general buildings have been about 5 high and at least 8 wide. That is like one of the tiny buildings over there. So let's say 8 by 8. So that's like a hut, essentially, like a human hut size building. Okay. So this one right here, that is about those dimensions. And then, from there, I've been, adding some half height ones. So ones that are potentially, have like a half a story where they actually start, like 2 meters off the ground, essentially. Hold on, let me actually snap that to the world grid. There we go. But yeah, I mean, we can start boxing stuff in real quickly. And then, like I said, I was playing around with that over here just to kind of get a visual, like how much space do we actually have, and learned that we have a lot of space in the process of doing that. So yeah, no, if we want to rough out some areas.
Can I make some suggestions? Let's actually play with the idea of scale in mind, right? Let's sort of do some work with scale in mind. So Harrison, let's block out really quick what a tiny building would be, what a small building would be, a medium-sized building would be, and then basically like a large building. And let's actually define them. So when we say like tiny, we're talking something like a hut or a residence, perhaps a one-off shop, or maybe a tent or something like that. Let's actually define what these sizes mean. A medium-sized building, is that an inn? Or should an inn be a large building? Is a temple a medium-sized, a shrine a medium-sized building, and a temple a large building? Let's just create some working definitions, if you will, and then plonk one of each of those. I love this word, plonk. It's like a word of the day. What do you call it? Plop each one of those down, just so we can see them in relation to each other. Then go to our abstraction and start basically assigning sort of sizes to the respective structures there. And that way, we'll actually start seeing them in relation to each other spatially.
Yeah. So like I said, this is probably spot on for these buildings. Actually, why not just bring that whole thing over here?
In the meantime, Aurora Bros said, actually being able to watch you guys build all this really gives a next level desire to get in and play that I haven't had for a game in a long time. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much.
Aurora said, I was game to get in with the capsule characters. Fair enough. So Goblin was in here a second ago. I want to make sure that Goblin wasn't trying to talk and we just had him muted or something weird going on, so I'll shoot him a message.
All right. Nope, that was not what I wanted. Nope, actually, what am I doing? I wanted 90. I need to fix this prefab that I copy-pasted, and widget is way over there. Okay, so let me snap this to what I was using as a road plane. And granted, the roads and stuff will more than likely be actually painted onto the geometry. But so, here's a cluster. I would call that a smaller, but this is probably a smaller building. This would be more of a hut. And then this would be kind of more of a medium building. And then over here is kind of what I'd roughed in for an inn, which is supposed to support like 50 people hanging out inside of it comfortably. You could probably fit. You could probably fit more. You could probably get 100 in there.
Harrison, could you take these buildings and situate them like just outside the city walls, so we can kind of see them individually and to scale against each other, and then we can start kind of copying and dragging them into the Traveler's Ward.
Let me.
So for our viewers who are watching and might watch this later, the entire western section of Night Harbor is called Dunewatch, and it divides into two districts that are separated by these roads over here. So there's the North Dunewatch and South Dunewatch. And North Dunewatch is kind of like a traveler's district, which is the area that we're talking about fleshing out or experimenting on right now. And the southern one is kind of like a garrison district, if you will. It's more centered around the defenses of the city, etc., and so forth.
You see me bringing the prefab of this. There, that's what I wanted. Over here, and then where is? Granted, the inn's bringing a lot of extra stuff with it, but whatever. At this point, I can always draw a box around it real quick.
Yeah. It's representational. It's as long as the scale is kind of.
Yeah. Actually, I'll do that. That'll be easier for me to move around. Grab a box.
I had the little chat widget turned off, so we can't see the chat on the VOD. Sorry about that. I was just cleaning up the screen space for a minute, but I'm hoping chat reappears. I turned it back on. Excuse me. In the meantime, Lord Sacrum said, guys, there's a city called Toledo in Spain that was made in a desert in a rocky mountain. Check it for inspiration. I brought it up in a tab, and I'm looking at some pictures. Very cool. And we'll check it out offline as well. We gather up tons of ref, so it's always good. Thanks.
I'm always grabbing more reference. Actually, I might have reference of that city now that I'm thinking about it. Somewhere. All right. So that is representational of our inn. Actually, let's give it the height too. I did like the height on this.
Hey, Goblin.
Hi, Goblin.
Oh, he's back.
Hello.
How's it going?
Oh, it's going pretty good. Pretty good.
Yeah, so those of you that have maybe just tuned in the last little bit, essentially, if you go back to and watch the VOD, you'll hear us talking a bit about our workflow and some of well, honestly, this is one of the ones where I would definitely recommend if you've come in a bit late. There's plenty to see in the VOD, and it'll absolutely be worthwhile. The way that we're working, because we all live in different parts of the world and different states in the U.S. and Canada, and I'm in Germany. Is we've found working in Slack and using Slack's huddles. I'm sure there's other software that does it similarly. It's just been, I feel like it's been pretty effective because we're almost always chatting about something in one of the various topic channels in Slack. We've got like 30 or whatever. And so that allows us to chat pretty, asynchronous. English is hard. Asynchronous. Oh my God. I've been in Europe for like 7 years, and I swear that's why I can't speak English anymore. Asynchronously?
Yeah.
Yes.
I've always lived in America, and I still can't speak English, so.
So like it's one of those things where it's rough when you're trying to go to bed and a cool topic pops up, unless you're Ollie and you don't sleep, or well, pretty much it seems like everybody on the team, except me. I like to sleep. But you wake up, we catch up. When everybody's awake during windows like this, we do a lot of work like this. So if someone's not streaming, we're probably still streaming to each other in the background. And so it's cool to be able to watch, Zukan or Pattis or Goblin or Nick or anybody's, streams and get caught up on what we missed. And then like, for me, I'll hear something in a stream and like type it into Slack and be like, oh, so-and-so asked a question at this point. I think this is the answer. But then when we're just working together, like we'll hop in a lot into huddles, whether it's concept work or modeling or whatever. And, we can get in here and just sort of make notes and draw and communicate pretty effectively, pretty quickly. So I think that's been a huge help for us as a team. And it's felt, it's felt as productive, if not more, than being in the same building and working together with sort of set core hours and all that stuff in my experience or in my opinion. So.
All right, so we got all representations that are real easy to move around.
Perfect. Let's walk through them. Let's actually go through them and define them, I guess.
Cool. So we've got kind of our large inn. We've got a small, basically the smallest hut style building that we could use. We've got kind of a little cluster of just average housing. Got our little tent. Yeah, that's basically it.
Let's also plug in there a shape to represent a temple.
That could really be any shape.
I mean, it can be just a cube, but I mean, in terms of scale, say, versus an inn.
Yeah. Trying to think of what we want to do for that.
It's all right if it's arbitrary for now. We can always adjust. It's just we want to see them.
I'll make it slightly smaller.
Well, it should be. I would say temples can be a fair bit smaller. I mean, they're a visual point of interest, but they're not like a. I mean, you're not seeing these things, or at least not consistently or on average, being like a much larger structure, relatively speaking, are you?
Not at all. No.
Okay.
And to me, the building size is a question of its function. If it needs more people in there, then it should obviously be a little bit bigger. And temples or shrines should, service basically either the aesthetic that we want them to have. Like, say, if we had a cathedral or something like that, and it's an important, part of the city's aesthetic, then I would argue make it bigger, and we'll figure out functions for it to be in there. But if it's just sort of a shrine that people visit, say, for example, faction games with a particular faith, or let's say a trainer, or something along those lines, then no, I imagine it'd be smaller.
Cool.
So fix the center pivot on this one. So it's a little under quarter the size of the inn right now. Probably should have been a little bit more exact, but whatever.
Nope, that's good. That works. What about a shop? Let's say a standalone shop that's not part of a cluster.
That's not part of a cluster? So are you talking like a little stall?
You know what? Like something like, let's say, the stalls that you'd see in the bazaars or the markets that we have over here.
So I would probably do that around. Actually, we can just use the stairs. Oh shit! Sometimes Pro Builder is weird with some shapes. Let me. Actually, probably easier just to grab the vertices. Oops, helps if I grab all of them. And something like that. And And then just let me bridge these so that we can actually see it from all angles.
You just select the edge and hit what? B or
Alt and B.
Alt B?
Yes, I just learned that hotkey the other day.
Handy.
And collapsing stuff down is Alt and C, and then drawing an edge between two vertices is Alt E. Why isn't this one drawing? That makes me wonder. Hold on a second. Oh, I'm selecting off in the
distance.
terrain too.
That's always pain.
Yep.
Yeah.
I've even been having that problem with Maya lately. I'll sit down and like try to help a student with something, and the next thing I know, I'm grabbing like the back of the model again. I'm like, oh, it used to be so much better, or it was at one point, and it was worse at one point too. So, all right, that should be enough room for a player, like an NPC, and then essentially people in front. Oop, and I forgot to mute my phone. I apologize, everybody.
Is that Game of Thrones?
That is Game of Thrones.
Yeah, we'll definitely be sneaking in pet references and other references in the game. Don't you worry.
Hold on. We need to do height on this. I did not do height. Probably, my guess would be 3, so it's closer to kind of a standard ceiling height for like a gnome or hobbit structure. Oh my gosh, why are these?
Note to lawyers, we did not say hobbit.
Oh, yeah, good call. Good call.
Igdy RCE, thank you for the follows. Good evening, Beaver.
There, it took longer than it should have, but.
Oh, that's great. All right, let's do it. Let's populate the Traveler's Board.
Okay, sounds good to me. Let's drag these. I don't need all of those.
So for everybody watching, you see the main gates of Night Harbor right there in the center. Okay, and that's the represented, I guess, where you can see Sojourner Mongoose Clan Camp. The words there. It's kind of, you see these this little gatehouse over here, and then another gatehouse to the north of it. So the Travelers District, or the Travelers Ward, sits between these two roads and to the north of those roads as well.
Okay. So
Yep.
do we have any plan? Do you have anything specific that we'd like to target or like block out first?
Let's do an arbitrary layout, right? So just
Yeah.
north of from the wall to close to the entrance to the Old Temple complex, let's drop a bunch of those tents to represent the Mongoose Sojourner clan.
Okay.
And this is our little travelers camp, if you will. So for those watching who's wondering what the Mongoose clan is, basically a nomadic clan that has presence across the POC zone. And this is where they've kind of wandered into the city and have settled not settled, but this is where they are at the moment.
And then in terms of like specific layout and alignment and stuff like that, do we want to just work more towards expediency, or are you looking to get like an actual true visual representation?
What the purpose of this exercise, to my mind, is to actually start putting stuff down so that we can get a sense of scale and proportion that we would then translate to the other districts, with taking into account that the other districts, or the ones further east anyway, are elevated. And so as we start, it'll inform topography design and things like that based on assets that we're ready to deploy.
So basically, we check to ensure that we can fit everything in into the district, get a sense of scale, and then use that to inform the space that's needed for the other districts, so that when we start to break up the topography, we know that it's good to go.
And correct. And in addition to that, remember that the way Harrison's kind of built out Night Harbor's zones right now are a 1-to-1 proportion. They're at a 1-to-1 proportion with the abstract that I made. Plotting these things now and seeing them visually to admittedly an arbitrary scale, but a scale nonetheless, will inform us also as to whether that is too big, too small. Does the zone, it'll actually give us information about the size of a particular district as opposed to the size we have laid out here based on a zone abstraction.
Right. Yeah, because what I can see, being a part of this is as we look at it and we're like, all right, so we're calling this out as that one, I think that one item. If we go into the image, like the Sojourner Mongoose Clan camp. I think as we start to get the rest of all of these things, at least just loosely one building for everything that's in here, in there, then we can also look and go, all right, just visually, we can make the camp however big. In terms of fitting everything in, we need to actually eat up a bit of this footprint. And then in terms of gameplay wise, we may not need, 30 Mongoose Sojourner NPCs in here. So it's fine if we only have like these tents, like, whoop.
Oops, sorry.
And we call that the camp, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, so I'm just going to leave it like that for now.
Yeah, sure. Sounds good. Next structure on the list. What do you call it? The inn.
I'll just leave that one right here.
Check.
Check, done.
I moved this one. Granted, I'm not sure if it's technically inside the Travelers or it's on the border with the garrison, but I was like, oh, probably would be a good place to put the inn. So.
Maybe if I can recommend a place. Hold on a second. Let me get onto your thing so I can actually use the pen here. But this seems like a sensible. This seems like a sensible area for the inn because it falls between the two roads. So wherever people are kind of entering from can access the inn.
That makes a lot of sense. Actually, do we want it?
Just center it. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's fine.
I'm just going to center it for now. Although I'm going to push it because we want the market over here, right?
Yeah. Maybe push it in a bit. Yeah. Yeah, actually, that's cool because it allows an opportunity for a road extending into the old temple complex there as well. Yeah. That's a good idea. Why not? The caravan inspection post should probably be around here, someplace.
Sorry, what was that?
The caravan inspection post.
So, I'm assuming more of a smaller.
Yeah, it'll probably be a cluster, Harrison, because I imagine it'll be an inspection post. We'll probably link the stables next to it. Maybe there's a stockyard attached to it. Just let's represent it with a cluster of buildings at the moment.
I made a little stable size placeholder already.
Aces.
That I was placing over by the other. Oop.
I just realized I muted Discord and did not mute the stream. Sorry about that. I was trying to get my dog to get in his crate, and now I've got cheese puffs that I'm eating, so I should probably learn how to mute.
Something that I'm actually pretty excited about with this is Pattis and and Ham and I were talking a little bit about this before, but with a block in like this, basically what I plan on doing is actually be able to go in, find a nice angle or something, take a screenshot, and then actually utilize that screenshot for whatever I'd imagine the concepts to be. And this makes it so much easier and I think more a lot closer to what the final outcome will be, because now I'm actually seeing what we're happy with scale, which has been it's like I can make something cool, but is it actually what we want to scale? And that's going to be hard. And then like when it changes, or when we actually get it in, how does that affect scale? That sort of thing. And so this is going to be a really, really good touchstone for me to actually hop in, take a bunch of screenshots again, and basically dress it up with paint and color and the aesthetics and shapes that we want and everything. So I'm super excited about this part.
Yeah, we were actually mentioning you doing that, like passing this area off to you.
Mm-hmm.
Do that earlier.
Yeah, it'd be nice taking some of that guesswork out.
Okay, so do we want more buildings than the stable and this little kind of hut, or?
No, I think that's good. We have 2 temples to put in here as well. One to Relay and the other to El Tindra. What do you call it? Relay should probably be here in the south, like closer to this wall. Not wall, excuse me, to this road, somewhere over here.
Alrighty.
And again, very, very arbitrary, but you know.
Yep.
We're worshipping Relay.
Relay is a god of traveler, or goddess rather, of healing, excuse me, and what do you call it? Healing, life, fertility, things like that. What do you call it? Whereas El Tindra is the goddess of wanderlust and travelers. So I'm thinking the healing kind of closer to the Garrison district.
Makes sense.
And what do you call it? El Tindra sort of up here, maybe on this road or in this corner, even, before going into the old temple complex, maybe here, Harrison or something like that, like on this street corner.
Nice, close to the inn as well.
Mm-hmm.
So this will be one of those things where someone will watch this stream, and in 15 years there will be a debate about how to properly pronounce the name. So
sure as heck, we're not all agreed.
I know. I was like, wait a second. Let me bring up the pronunciation guide, which we'll never share with you guys, so that you can continue to argue for decades to come. But her name should be Rel.
I can guarantee the way you don't pronounce it is the way that the dyslexic environment artist pronounces anything. So, pro tip right there.
It's just and he said, oh, now I can't even. How do you pronounce it? Relay?
Rel.
Well, let's go.
The E is quiet.
Yeah,
okay. Quiet. Yeah, the only reason I said that was because I was thinking into Lovecraft stuff with Relay, the lost city of Cthulhu, and
fair point.
So I was just like, what? That's who we're worshiping now in the city? Okay.
All right. Relatives. I'm sold on that. We have an odd structure, like just a sort of a bathhouse, and I think that'll fit nicely, like somewhere close to the inn, maybe the opposite end of the street or something like that, or maybe here, kind of close to the temple.
I feel like this one should probably be larger. Oop. Helps if I grab. Actually. Oh, I hit the delete button. I'm like, what just happened? There we go.
So bathhouses in Near and Middle Eastern sort of cultures were social communing points as well. So this might be this one. I literally plugged it in there as a bit of an experiment. I honestly do not have at this point in time a rhyme and reason for it. I just know that it's kind of a communal place, and I thought it might be interesting to give reasons for players to congregate in there to talk about things, or have NPCs that can get them set off their way to do certain things, or maybe, you know, important people from the town hang out in there, and so those are the places where you could go engage and speak to them, you know, and things like that. So it's you know, not a necessary structure, if you will, but just a flavor oriented one.
Bathhouse.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I can imagine the role playing that will go on.
They go in there and drink some mate, share some straws.
See, I foresee a lot of streaking gnomes.
What else have we gotten here? We did the stables. I guess the riding trainer could be there as well. The hospital, the Wayfarer's Hospice.
Where do we want to put that?
Let's see. Probably main gate. Maybe here. Maybe. Sorry, hold on. Wrong screen. Maybe there.
I feel like that could be a larger building as well.
Don Smith, thank you for the follow.
Oops.
Because I think we had skill trainer in there. Yeah. Anyway, representationally, yeah, that's fine. But you're right. It's a slightly larger building. Let's see. What else have we got? Bank, auction house. I mean, I kind of plopped these in there without, and please don't shoot me for this, but without, let's say, an acute awareness of how EverQuest was, and whether, you know, my frame of reference was World of Warcraft. To be honest with you, it's the only MMO I've ever played. Those of you who might have seen me on the stream before might know that, but for those who haven't, that's my minimal background experience in engaging with MMOs. I'm mostly pen and paper, tabletop role-playing game oriented, as we mentioned. So I kind of put these buildings, or rather points of interest or sites in there, but I don't know if they're necessarily relevant to our game at this point in time. So Shawn, maybe I'll let you take a judgment call on that one.
I will have to admit that I was answering a question in chat, and I missed exactly what you just asked me, other than apologizing for playing other video games, which we have to say that we are not inspired by any one game. I think we have to say that for legal reasons, and we have a robust amount of experience on the team, so never have to apologize for playing one game or another. But so what were you saying? Good.
Functionally, in the game, I don't know if we want to have places like banks and auction houses for the players. So I included them in the list because I thought it'd be appropriate to put them in this zone if we had them, but I don't know if we actually want them.
So auction house, no. That will be something that's player driven. Banks, yes. And we've even got like the placeholder banker in the current build that Nick's put in there. So bank is yes. And we may even do more than one based on accessibility or something, but it's cool to have it here.
So would you say that a bank is a place where players will congregate, so it needs to be more of a medium-sized building, or maybe a large building, or to your mind, in terms of scale and for placeholder object on the map we're making now, what do you think?
I think the degree to which they congregate will be sort of one of those emergent things, but it's safe to assume that there will be a number of players in there, especially for proof of concept, given that our player distribution will be, you know, essentially we'll have all of our players in one area, and yeah. So short answer is it would not hurt for it to be a little bit bigger.
Yeah, I'm doing it right now. It's kind of this medium building. We can make it larger, but I just assume enough to have people in there, but then people can always congregate outside of it.
Yeah, we don't necessarily want them setting up shop in there. So we'll see.
Maybe we could fit the bank between the two temples, actually. That's for narrative reasons that it's not the right time to reveal to the viewers, but to my mind, I'll explain to the team a little bit later off stream why I think that's the right kind of placement.
Sounds good to me. All right, so we got the bank. What else do we want to put in?
Let's see what else we got on the list. Just a second. We got the two temples. We've got the inn, the bathhouse. Right on. So there's the tanneries and the leatherworking trainer and basically the first aid trainer, which the first aid trainer I guess will be at the Wayfarer's Hospice. That's more like yeah, I suppose that would be the case. But now let's talk about the tanneries and things like that, right? So let's jump back onto the map. So what I imagine is like over here. So you notice that, you know, this already takes up just a minimal amount of space, right? So in theory, the tanneries are kind of like in this area.
So where the necropolis is on the map?
Basically leading up to the necropolis and
Okay.
probably going over the necropolis once we start doing the elevations in the city. To my mind, that's kind of how it'll work out. The reason for that is tanneries are really, really low class places. They stink from hell to high heaven. You know what I'm saying? And should be like a bit of a sprawl here, if you will, right? So what do you call it? I think like in terms of the functions, the skill trainers will be there, things like that. There's an opportunity to introduce like a racial faction place there as well. I'm thinking might be a good place for trolls actually over here. We'll see about that specifically. But this would not be like a single building. It'll be like a sprawl off buildings that are spread out over this area. So maybe, you know, like about that much space, if you will.
I was to make one larger one kind of in the middle, just to represent the space.
Yeah, and maybe leave some space for a courtyard in there as well, where they actually do the work on the ground and, you know, things like that.
Apologies for eating on stream. I, timing wise, did not have a chance to eat dinner yet tonight.
If you could connect these with like a small wall or a fence, that would be really representational of a tannery district.
Yeah.
Like not a wall as such, maybe a fence, something that comes to about waist level on a human or something like that. You know?
Yeah, easily enough. I tried scaling it with snapping on way above what I was trying to scale it at, so it collapsed into a plane. Oops.
Watching you use Pro Builder, I really dig it.
It's pretty powerful. I mean, for as primitive as it is, once you get the shortcuts down, it gets even faster.
Well, you were mentioning on your stream the essentially the fact that the style with, or the style of the sort of structures and the way things are built in the grid and all that really work for the aesthetic that we're shooting for.
Oh
it
yeah,
makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it's definitely it's powerful but limiting, and it definitely fits that kind of constrained aesthetic we're looking for, I think. In terms of, you know, we don't want to be able to sit there and bevel every edge. We don't want to sit there and, you know, make sure everything's rounded off, which is real easy to do nowadays. But the limiting portion of this definitely helps, at least me, keep in that kind of old school, more limited things. I can't cut into everything super easily.
Constraints are good at times.
Yeah.
So just real quick, so he's either Stotheg85 or Stow the G. Thank you for the follow. Zukan was just asking, if horses are forbidden inside the city, will there be a meaningful place to hang out with utilities where people can be on their mounts? Because I know people like to show off their ride and or AFK on it in a high traffic area. We've got stables and stuff listed. My note was that they should be outside. Like there's what did you have? I thought I thought we had it listed on the map. Yeah, stables are there, and then there's a caravan inspection post in the caravan gate.
Okay, so tannery area. What else do we need? I don't have the map checklist open.
I'm kind of bouncing between screens. What do you call it? Looking at it myself. Gay, camp inspection camp, whatever. The inn, the bathhouse, town. Okay, so then last but not least is the sprawl. And this is basically Harrison, do you mind going top down in terms of the view? Thank you. Perfect. Okay. So let me just take a quick look at this and see if we can kind of cluster things together a bit better. So you notice already that we've got all this negative space just begging to be filled out. This could be more concentrated and not so spread out. This might actually benefit from just getting plopped over there as opposed to over here. That inn can be brought closer to the road. In fact, can we actually make these adjustments before we move on?
Yeah. Simple enough. Although this one, whoops, helps if I'm in the right mode. Whoops, and helps if I have that wall. The angle of it's going to be off, but I can fix that later.
That's okay. It's just representational right now.
Yeah. And then
get the inn a little closer to the road.
Let me just grab it through the prefab because that's just going to be way easier.
So now, essentially, what we've got is just looking at this. Actually, this is interesting. Yeah, I think this is too sprawled out. You know what I mean? I think this could benefit from, like, you know, becoming a bit more compact.
Yep.
And I think what I would err on the side of caution and compact it this way to bring it closer to the street as opposed to the city wall, because we can always redact the city wall and bring it in closer to suit the zone needs.
Which ones are those?
Now with the camp here, is this a very specific type of camp? Because I remember doing a little concept, and I'm unsure if you'd actually had seen it, where I've done basically where multiple cultures would be kind of in the same sort of campground. Is this the campground for Night Harbor?
No, Goblin. That idea is a slightly older one. This is a newer thing that I haven't actually discussed with the team at large, though I've mentioned it to Shawn. So this is a sojourner camp, and it's a very specific clan of the sojourners over here. So it's not multicultural, if you will.
But do we? So when you mentioned that, I didn't think that it precluded there being other travelers there, because it seems like we've got to have a place for them, and that seems like a good location, right? So, because the sojourners are not the only travelers coming to Night Harbor.
Correct. So what I'm saying is that what I listed down was a sojourner camp, not a traveler's camp, but there's no reason not to have, say, the sojourner camp here and the traveler's camp there, and this is kind of like the camps or the traveling camps as districts.
Cool.
The sojourners are there for narrative reasons. The traveler's camp is one that maybe I'm not 100% certain on the functionality of, like in game, like what would be there in the camp. So that's maybe something that we could discuss. I took the liberty of swapping out the traveler's camp for the sojourners camp, again, for narrative reasons, but not necessarily with the understanding of what the gameplay functionality.
Well, I think that's one of those examples where you know the Chekhov's gun sort of thing is. We've talked about this before, where it's like, all right, do we know this very moment what every traveler's purpose is in the camp? I would say the one purpose that the travelers would have is to represent the fact that people travel here, because it's we want to go ahead and both from an aesthetic and sort of base fictional standpoint acknowledge that, but then what we do is that gives us the opportunity for 6 months down the road, we're like, oh, there's the cranky gnome that just traveled here from blah blah blah, and we've got the ability to go, all right, let's put the gnome in that tent, or you know what I mean, like, oh, there's the whatchamacallit, right? And so it gives us that canvas to be able to be creative later without then having to refactor anything, because we've already designated this is where people who travel to Night Harbor plop down.
I acknowledge that. I think the question I would pose back, we don't have to actually get into this right now, but the question that I would put back is, why would travelers coming to Night Harbor not just go for the inn?
Because they either find it more cost effective because they're traveling, so they have kit with them, right? Unless they're just going on a day trip, but it's a very big world. So they're already traveling with tents and caravans and things of that nature. And so they can, if we were to say that folks that are traveling that have that sort of setup are going to be designated somewhere outside of the city gates, then we can do that. Otherwise, we essentially make a RV park of sorts for the people that are coming through and passing through and aren't either desirable at an inn. They don't like to sleep indoors. It's too expensive for them. And it just sort of aesthetically, it's a thing that we want.
I understand now. That's actually awesome. And I've already got ideas for that. So yes, noted and agreed to. And I will come back to you with my thoughts on it a little bit later. In the meantime, yeah, okay, you've already blocked out the space for it. So yeah, here you go. Here's our little district.
Even opened up a little bit more space so we have more room to put more camp areas.
And again, it doesn't need to be massive because I think representational, if you've got even this for one group of people like Sojourner Camp, that's a ton of real estate. The whole camp itself could probably be this big, because if we were playing an old game from the early 2000s, it would be one wagon and an ogre, right?
Yeah.
True.
Yeah, I agree. I think that if we kept the wall as is, just for representation, and just say this is our sort of travelers, traveling camps as district, you know what I'm saying, between the Caravan Road and the mountains, we're sorted. And Harrison, just for a laugh, actually, let's throw in a guard tower. What do you call it over here?
Good call. That was on my mind, was like, when everything was kind of smushed up on the wall, it's like, we've got this entrance and everything's smushed on the wall. Are we going to have any parapets or guard towers or anything that sort of defensive structures?
Yeah, this is all super representational right now.
Fair point. Yep. Fair point.
But yeah, we can just leave that there for now. Let me get rid of this one. But yeah, I played around with a little bit of just adding like, oh, these are where guard towers could essentially be. But I wasn't sure if we wanted to keep the same style of, arched entrances, or how we want to handle those yet. So I haven't gotten into actually modeling any of that out.
No, that's all right. We'll look at design, like aesthetic design later. Right now, we're addressing the question of like layout and scale. So if you take a look at this, if we Harrison, can I trouble you to do a top-down view again?
Sure.
So based on the non-proportional map that we had, this would be how that district is kind of laid out, right? So as you can see, it's kind of, it sprawls over this area, and here we go. Here's our Traveler's Ward. But at the same time, look at the challenge that it's put to us. It says, look at all this negative space that we can still deploy. So it begs the question, can we compact this zone even more?
Before we do that, I would remind you of the desire to have both stubbed in empty buildings, right? So Ollie's keen on ensuring that we've got enough space for player housing, and then essentially aesthetic sprawl, where even if we don't know who lives there, we know that we want to have the opportunity for NPCs to live there.
My idea would be to condense this over slightly, and then since this is going to have market area, this area could easily fill in the sprawl that would go here. I think it would make more sense in this area than over here.
I'd actually add, I'm like, since this road is going to go to the park district and kind of slope down because we have a depressed park, I would suggest that the sort of the elevated or the multi-tiered rooftop sprawl is actually more kind of over here and winds around towards the harbor, okay, and then tapers out a little bit. And it has a break in it, so more kind of like natural escarpments over here, and this is a natural elevation sort of leading up. Again, I'll address that in the refined map to scale, but this actually seems to work very, very well for the moment. If we had to fill out this space, what would we be looking at? What are your thoughts on this? Like, are we talking residential buildings, which to me don't necessarily make a lot of sense? Maybe we have a square over here with a fountain, like a plaza of some kind.
Yeah, I think that's one thing we really didn't mess with much in the block out, was creating those features that ultimately are going to break things up, right? Because whatever sort of plaza or square we do here, we'll probably see reflected in some way or another. Yeah, different scale, even in the sprawl.
So it could be something a little bit more. Oops, where'd the inn go?
Right there.
There's already so much stuff in the hierarchy. I had to clean it up earlier because I was starting to lose stuff. So yeah, a little bit more condensed, but that opens up this area for a lot more of that stuff.
Yeah, what I'm thinking is actually this could be a plaza of some kind, or we could plop the inn back there.
Gives a nice overflow for the end as well.
Yeah.
Thank you for 6 months, Whitechapel.
There we go. Oops, and something happened to the terrain right there. Let's fix that. Yep.
Yeah, it actually makes more sense to me given the current layout that in terms of sizing and scale, like that is sort of the city wall boundary and everything. Like we bring this back to align with this.
So move the walls to about where this temple is.
Roughly, something like that.
The only issue, hold on, let me make it so I can actually turn, is it'll affect some of this stuff over here too. Do we want it to be something like the walls move in and it slams into this, which is kind of really giant representation of like where the fort structures would be, and then the fort has more of a, an exposure along that the edge of the wall, which seems to me like that'd be a little bit better for fortification anyways.
Aesthetically, that actually looks a little bit more pleasing. It's more interesting to have like irregular shapes.
I agree.
I think it's awesome. But the going back to the point of this exercise, though, it's basically now that we've started, playing with the district sizing, we're starting to see what it kind of looks like, because we've put down the elements there, and now we're seeing how much space those elements take to scale, basically, right? And it's indicating to us where our negative space is. It's, basically making us confront the question of how do we fill in that negative space? Do we incorporate plazas, fountains, things like that? How do we make the place feel more alive? Where are we going to plug in our residences, et cetera, and so forth, right? So I think that in that sense, this exercise is very revealing.
So what we could also do is, if this is kind of where the fortress area is going to be for the garrison, this wall could extend to here, and then instead of the gate for the garrison being there, it could actually go into the fortification area too.
So, looking at the garrison relative to even the inn, which I think is our biggest structure to date.
This is very, very oversized right now.
Okay. I was like, they are not playing around.
No, that was blocked in and has not been adjusted at all. Right now it's gigantic. It's like made by giants.
I just realized we've been so engrossed in this that I haven't been doing the usual sort of commercials and stuff. So those of you that are not aware of what we're working on, we are working on the game Monsters and Memories. You can click the link in chat, get to our website. You can also join us in Discord. I think we're like, I don't know, where are we at? Like 600 people strong, which is fantastic. We love it because when we're not on stream, we can still chat with you guys. There's a lot of really fun design and other conversations going on there. Be sure to chat it up in Discord, because the more you chat, the more Discord, almost 700, Nick said. Amazing. The more you chat and use Discord, the more Discord likes it. And that will, over time, unlock some additional functionality for us. So we appreciate you guys being a vibrant community. Our mailing list was like, I think, at 1,100 people. Last I checked. The mailing list is where we send surveys, and we'll be sending all sorts of fun information. We send our updates there as well. So it's worthwhile to be on the mailing list. I'm checking that number right now. But we're at 1,111 subscribers. 1111, make a wish. And later on, when we're talking playtesting and stuff like that, we'll be hitting up our mailing list. It's just a great metric for us to kind of get a feel for how many people are interested in the game. And we have a number of people streaming. So essentially, we're watching Pattis's screen right now. You can follow him on Twitch. Goblin is drawing goblins right now. You can follow him on Twitch. Zukan is in meetings today, unfortunately, but he does critters for us and other modeling. And character art, you can follow him. And Nick was just answering questions in our chat. You can follow him for design, QA, and generally just a great source of information. So those are all the commercials. You guys can resume.
My pen broke at the end, so...
Yeah, I started trying to move, and my pen was not letting me move. But yeah, no, this is way larger. But we could do something like that, where, whatever the fortification actually ends up being shaped like, could be, built kind of into the wall structure. I don't know how exactly we lay it out, but and then you've just got like the garrison has a quick way to come out. Too. Granted, we aren't going to be having massive wars, but then they could flank people attacking the other gates.
Well, that's what you think.
Something that I wanted to mention about the camp here. Let's see. Oh, well.
Sorry, let me rotate.
Yeah. So. Actually, I wonder, could I grab the Slack screen just for a moment?
Yeah, I'll stop sharing. And while you guys are doing that, I'm going to clean up some of these tents and stuff that jumped into the wall geo as I moved it.
So as soon as Goblin shares, I'll put it back up for you guys.
Yeah. Can you guys see this? Let me know.
Yep, I can see it. It's up. Neon Lights, thank you for the follow.
So Ham, this was something that we had talked about just really quickly, actually, in terms of the camp. It was originally when it was kind of like mentioned to me, I was like, oh, this is a really good place for different cultures of different types of players to or not just meet but intertwined. So I ended up like having these like right here. I'll draw on my own screen now. Like these like little steps that were, you know, gnome sized or you know, sized for ogres or sized for other races basically. But beyond that, there was this where let's see. So we have, I'm not sure if these have been, I'm pretty sure Harrison has worked on these on stream, but there are these different types of tents, basically. But aside from that, I did this little, and this is just an idea of it. It doesn't have to be followed by any means, like to a T. But the idea was pretty, oops.
Oh yeah.
Pretty simply, it was this, where you'd have, I'll use this to draw. I'd have like, you know, I'm basing this off of my own experience going camping where, you know, you have your own kind of section that is technically like separated off. And, you know, I'm less intent on having it totally separated, but the idea that you have, you know, a culture here that have set up camp and they have a fire going or something, and then you have another culture here in the corner, and it's just these ruins that are, or these small ruined walls that are basically acting as partitions or dividers. But then you have this overflow sort of thing where all of them are interacting with each other, and then beyond that we have areas where, you know, you go down into what is essentially like an area for the deep to go do that. And then Harrison had mentioned that, oh, you could open something up here where it's like actually a cave, and then you have the deep races kind of hanging out here where, because, you know, they don't like sunlight as much, that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. And then, you know, I think this was like a wall for a certain type of either guard or a certain type of player. I forget exactly which, but that was sort of the idea behind what I thought the Travelers Camp would be, and then these would kind of have like these extra like walls or whatever for different players of different sizes to be able to interact with or be on the same level of, or have a comfortable place to sit, that sort of thing. But that was the idea, I guess. And so that interacting with like a more dominant like other culture here makes sense to me. It's just having enough room and having both of those I guess interact and work with each other that makes sense to me. But that's, I'm not sure if you had seen that or not. That's all.
I hadn't actually seen it before, and I love some of the ideas that you put forward here. So let me frame it in a constructive way. So in terms of the ideas and translating, like, let's say like the area that we've designated as the Travelers Camp, which includes the Sojourners, the Mongoose Clan sort of enclave or camp as well, like as a placeholder or as a locational identifier, let's call it for want of a better word, that's kind of the purpose of this exercise. But that does not preclude then you as the concept artist saying, how do I make this visually interesting, and how do I kind of deploy it in there, and you know, that gives the guys on the modeling side of things stuff to work with. I think it's fantastic. I think the ideas that you just put forward are absolutely outstanding. In a very specific sense, the only thing I'd be sort of mindful of is, will it add or detract or cannibalize from the district that we've called the Underbelly, which is where the deep races kind of prefer to congregate because they prefer living in a subterranean environment. But, you know, that's honestly such a, what can I say? It's so open to interpretation at this stage in time that ideally how it ends up looking is completely open to your suggestions and your ideas. In fact, you know, I'm kind of hoping you work your magic and make them, you know, take them from sensible and practical and, you know, deployable to visually pleasing and you know, just sort of enhance that whole sort of gaming sort of experience in terms of what you see around you. I mean, I think it's set up to be that way. So I don't dismiss or disqualify any of the ideas that you've just sort of walked through. I just say since we've developed the zones, there's the underbelly to kind of keep it in mind as well with that. And if you see it fit, then hey, knock it out.
Yeah, I mean,
Knock it out.
I can picture it as, because the underbelly is established as something that it's more a residential district, whereas again, having the variety of travelers that pass through, especially given the scale, I think it provides kind of some cultural texture there, and then it's an area where it's probably small enough that it winds up being a fairly low invest, right? Because then what we have, instead of culture specific, very sort of culture specific flair, we can convey a fair amount with just some different tents and different NPCs. And we've already got the boardwalk areas where we've got that sort of underlayer that Pattis has already built out. And so if we gave a little tiny taste of that, like not like a big blown out area, but just like a little taste where it goes down and it's essentially sort of a room or enough to fit some NPCs in there, I think it's something that we've already got all the pieces for, and we can do pretty low risk. Pattis, did you want to share again so I can get something up on the screen?
Yeah. And while Harrison's doing that, Shawn, we've kind of expanded on the underbelly idea. So it's not just a residential area where the deep races kind of congregate. It's also a specialty services area. So, I don't know if I can actually mention any examples on the stream, but if you look at the list, there is at least one example on the list that kind of I provided. But the idea is that it's and it's not just the deep races. There's a human population there as well. Yeah, I'm kind of hesitant on what I can say and what I can't at the moment.
I'm looking. I've got it up on my other monitor now. I'll look.
But suffice it to say that Goblin, going back to you and your point, I think if like you, myself, Shawn, and Harrison at a minimum, and that's not to preclude the other team members, but if we sat there and had a quick discussion on the sort of the theme of each of the zones and really narrowed down our focus as to what very specific theme and function what do you call the respective zones and areas would serve, I think that's when you can kind of go ape on concepting and fleshing that stuff out aesthetically. Because we've definitely already incorporated some of your concept work into some of these zones. Like some of the very early images that you shared with us, the ones that I've been privy to anyway, what do you call it? Like I took inspiration from that and worked it into the zones. So there's some very amazing opportunities here for like concept art to drive narrative as well. You know what I mean? And I think we should capitalize on that. So maybe it's a conversation for later. Let's earmark it.
Yeah, totally. I'm mostly thinking of because like let's say story is like one facet that you want to really think about, and then let's say realisticness or how it fits in the world is like another. But then I guess the main focus for me, while those were kind of set, I was mostly focused on the gameplay elements of being like, actually, I'd really like a place for players to be able to hang out and meet other cultures and stuff like that, and not just meet other cultures, but see how their cultures interact with others and have them side by side, and that basically a small community sort of thing where people can hang out. I as far as like a gameplay place, that's where my main goal was for that. But again, like we can definitely have more talks about it, but then especially moving forward, especially with these blockouts, like we're going to be seeing a whole lot more, I think, of like some of that more successful bringing these sort of things together. That's how I see it, at least.
And that's the intent. That's the ultimate intent, right? It's to bring all these things together. So while it's a human, let's say, human sort of dominated city, it's still a multicultural melting pot, and that's got to reflect in the aesthetics as well, right? So it's definitely something that definitely a direction that we want to go in. It is the ultimate goal, I believe, to be able to convey that, and it's important to convey that even through the narrative. And I think it's just we need a moment to kind of align our thoughts on the narrative. You see what I'm saying? And then design from there.
Oh yeah, totally.
Brilliant. Yeah, I'm pretty psyched for it, actually.
So
like this. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just about to say, what are you doing right now?
I feel like this area just needs some minor separation. I was just kind of coming down more to a street level. So I was thinking maybe dropping like a little wall or something here. Yep. We can get rid of that. Actually, I could use that. To do what I was going to do. And this is what happens when you do it from way up in orbit. You don't see when you miss. Sorry, my kids are probably talking.
Okay.
I don't know if you guys could hear them because my mic's open. Here, close the door open. All right. Now, here's the question. Would we want to keep a wall off? Like, would we want this walled off from the temple entrance? Or would we want, like, a passageway through there?
No, I think that we should have a road leading into it. And I'm leaning, this is very subjective, but I'm leaning to actually not having a wall. What do you call it, cording it off? It's more kind of like, the break would essentially be sand meets cobblestone road. You know what I mean? That kind of thing. That's the cordoning that I imagine. Like, I feel that this place actually benefit from that openness, if you will.
Oh, okay.
Again, that's a very subjective thing, Harrison. I think it can definitely benefit from more kind of discussion or even from concept design as Goblin kind of, injects his visuals.
I kind of like honestly, I kind of like it being like half walled off. I think is kind of where I'm the camp I'm in while standing in a camp. Well, these are now in the ground. Hold on. Getting down on the street level, I'm seeing all of the little elevation issues, and it's
don't focus on those.
Gonna drive me crazy.
Look at it. Go back up then. You're too close to the ground if you can see those issues.
But yeah. And then obviously we need to figure out the temple complex at some point, which is it's literally just a cube of a room right now. But do you guys want to move into another area, or
why don't we keep building the ground level stuff, basically, right? So I wanna try and I don't know if you guys agree with me or not, but I think for today's exercise, let's steer away from the districts that are actually going to be elevation centric until we've resolved the topography issue. And let's keep building for scale and things like that on the ground level here. So let's keep building Dune Watch is basically what I'm saying.
That's fine. Oops, hold on. I just turned off your guys' ability to draw for a second there. Yeah, so you guys want to start moving over into like this section?
Yeah, let's do Southern Dune Watch, which is the garrison district and all the way into the port. And
I should probably turn off the image. It might help us. And we'll move this giant floating in out of the way. All right.
Controversial idea, but this blocked out structure that is the garrison. What do you call? I know that you kind of traced around the actual map. Let's treat it more as a courtyard than a.
That's completely fine. I mean, I was just boxing it out, so I kind of had an idea where it was.
Awesome.
So how do we want to handle this? Do we like the idea of this being the gate being over here as opposed to over here?
I like it. I'm not married to the idea of 3 gates sort of side by side on one wall. I like there being sort of like a defensible kind of.
Yeah, I think it just ends up being more interesting that way too. So if we're doing it that way, you know, this is kind of like the central. I would imagine since this is the the fortifications for the garrison. You know, this is where the troops are moving in and out of.
Yep.
Obviously, but they're going to want some major fortifications along the wall.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, this is a little bit larger of a structure. But yeah, exactly. Like more over here too.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just
on the
doodling a
angle.
tower. It doesn't need to be extended at all. I was just sort of picturing it.
Well,
Line it.
I do think that the corner should be fairly, large, where
Provide them some cover when they're coming out of the gate.
you got more spots to rain arrows down on people. Put all the archers and rangers up there. Now I really have not roughed that. This was super rough in this area. I have not played around with anything really. I just moved this down so that it would be at the water level. So this part is completely up to interpretation from us because I have no immediate feedback on like what we're doing here. So if we're walking in here into a courtyard area, do we want it to be square? Do we want it to, more follow the topology, how it currently is? Do we want to change the topology?
I have some suggestions. Can we do a top-down view again, please? And I'll kind of square out some areas that are just suggestive, right? We don't have to marry them, but again, considering that the purpose here is to look at scale and things like that, let's have. So if that's the gate, then I think this is a bit of a soldier's courtyard, right? So maybe this is where we have like a courtyard like that. Okay, and obviously the courtyard will be, the boundaries of the courtyard are going to be structures, and I'll come to that in a minute. But I'm thinking an archery range there as well, and this is where our archers train. Okay, so let's say that that's a courtyard where they marshal, where they, they train, etc., and so forth. And then over here can be the garrison proper. Like, so the actual structure, and contained within it is the fighters, archers, and rangers kind of, let's say, respective guild functions, okay? And in addition to that, we want to have the rangers' stables, okay? The stables may be over here, something like that. Maybe that's the east boundary of the courtyard. Yeah, actually, that makes sense. So there you go, like the stables over here, the garrison proper kind of like over here, the naval yard over here, saying with the jetties and whatever sticking out, ships and what have you, and then the palisades basically blocking that off with this huge chain to seal off this area to render it defensible.
And we want the chain running through the water?
The chain should be liftable or lowerable. So when it's lifted, it acts as a straight, imagine like it's stretched taut. So it acts as a barrier for ships to get in. And when it's slacked and sinks into the water, that's what allows sort of the passage of ships.
Yeah, no, I think that works. So then we'll want Goblin to do some concepts on exactly what these structures look like and how they interact with that chain. Or actually, it should be more like that. But whatever. My one question, based off of what we were doing up here, where we have a courtyard, we've got stables, we've got an archery range. This, when you were drawing this out, still had a really large footprint. Do we want to keep it that large kind of wedge shape that I had up here, or do we want to what do we want this?
I would argue yes, for the following reason. One, the garrison as a structure in the city, serves multiple gameplay functions, okay, as well. So number one, let's look at it narratively. As a structure in the city, if it's a garrison and it's a big keep, that's what it is essentially. It's a keep, right? It's Night Harbor's first line of defense against all threats coming from the dunes. All right, ergo Dune Watch, right? So this is Dune Watch Citadel or Dune Watch Fortress or whatever it is, okay? But internally, it serves as 3 class guild functions, okay? And on top of that, it's my thoughts escape me. This is what happens when you pull all-nighters. Sorry, it'll come back to me when it comes back to me. But my point is that, yeah, it seems to me that it would be a slightly larger structure. What do you call it? Simply because it's a major landmark in the city. It's the city's main citadel.
That's fine. Also, I think that curve does keep it defensible from the inside. Obviously, this, you know, running along the wall. I might consider just actually building it more as the wall for this section, and maybe even, I don't know, maybe extending it down to here.
Instead of like going my literal kind of map, right, where you have this diagonal over here, feel free to sort of create a big tower over here as well, you know, or like a guard post or something like that, and square it up a little bit so it kind of works well with the rest of the terrain that you've kind of already put in here, so you don't have to reinvent the wheel, so to speak.
This area might change. This, I really haven't touched anything out here. I just kind of made it not flat. I hit it real quickly with like a brush that kind of changed the elevation in a couple spots. That's about it. But yeah, no, I do think the wedge shape works. I was just questioning if that's what we want to do. If the other thing is these docks over here will be right up against it. So do we want these docks to be almost like submarine pens where they like can dock right inside, like almost up inside of it? Or do we just want the docks to have like doorways that go into the lower levels of the keep?
That would be so cool. That like having this, and then like if you were to have like a building that's kind of like this, and then you have a boat that can kind of go in like that, and that'd be really cool.
Like a garage for ships, you know what I mean? It sounds so quirky and cool at the same time, and I think like why not? Look, we have 2 options, practically speaking, is what it comes down to. Option number 1 is that we extend the waterway out a little bit and then add normal piers and what have you. So maybe we can enlarge this area just a touch so that we have a flat sort of pier area, and what do you call it, with the respective jetties kind of sticking out, okay, to create the naval harbor. On the other hand, we can go crazy with Goblin's concepting, you know what I'm saying, and we can build our little ship garages, you know what I'm saying. And in fact, maybe this is another elevated area, you know what I'm saying, and they're using the inside of this natural cave to be kind of like the ship docks. You know, that's really open to interpretation right now. But let's again identify that at the end of the day, whatever happens here, it's not necessarily, it's aesthetic, not necessarily gameplay functional, right? So it's, at this point in time, there's not like there's going to be a vendor or a trainer or anything that's been pre-allotted to be there. We could always put something in later, depending on how it ends up looking. But at the moment, it's not. So if we, again, look at the breakdown of this place, so we've got our marshalling courtyard, we've got our stables over here, we've got the actual garrison kind of like over here with our, and we have the naval dock over here, right? Well, technically this is the naval dock, which leaves us with the rest of this space. Now, the halls of justice are here as well. Oh, and I remembered what I forgot earlier. The garrison also serves as the city's prison. So there is a sort of, if you will, a consideration to take with the space, the interior layout of the garrison. It has to be a building people can enter. There's 3 guild trainers there, class guild trainers there. Excuse me, that was very clumsy. 3 class guild functions there, as well as the town prison. Okay, and over here you have basically the courts, and a temple to the god of combat and you know, that's kind of like their general portfolio. So that's essentially how this district breaks down. However, the temple and the kind of more civic buildings could extend to this area as well. So this could be garrison proper, and this could be the civic sort of buildings that act as support buildings or structures or points of interest to the garrison district.
Yeah, no, that makes sense, having like the more support stuff being just north of it.
Yeah, I agree.
I'm trying to think of like if it's also going to act as the prison, where we would want to hold that? You said the court is over here?
Well, no. Now let's separate that, right? Let's actually
Or is
double
that
down.
going to be the support building that will be up in this
So
area?
the court and the temple, and will be up here.
Okay.
And I think what do you call it? Yeah. Whereas this will serve more kind of like the militaristic function.
And so with this area, I'd imagine not a whole lot of like actual mercantile stuff will be going through. That would probably be through here. And this would be something that is more like, hey, this is the officials of the city, and they're dealing with like prisoners that are possibly even being shipped into or something along those lines. But yeah, that's what I would imagine is and just as like a random, but what if there was like a little island or something over here that was also like a prison, like
I was already thinking, like, do we want to have like a jet out over into this area and that's where the prison is? But we could do that totally as an island. I mean, we already have the one little island with the lighthouse-ish thing over there. Mm-hmm. We could potentially have another one. I know the actual illustration has a bunch of little like broken off chunks of the
yeah. The truth is, I think it comes down to function again, right? So like having a prison in the city in terms of gameplay, is it a site of interest that players can visit, or is it a place where players could end up, or how is it actually going to be used?
It's interesting because I think this is similar to the conversation that we had earlier with regards to the travelers, right? We don't have anything specific in mind at the moment for the prison, but over the course of the next 20 years, could we think of stories or needs, quest implications or whatever for a prison? So,
we could do is...
So guys, there's prisons that's basically the act is kind of like holding for people who are, let's say, people who for want of a better term, misbehave in the city, and they're kind of held overnight, or they have to serve very small sentences and things like that. And then there's the hardcore criminals, right? And things like that. So why don't we just sort of err on the side of caution and use both? So the garrison can still serve as kind of like, it's got holding cells, you know what I'm saying, and like a little jail. But then you actually have the prison on the island where the convicts go, basically.
Right. Well, there's
the drunk tank.
There's jail. There's county lockup or city lockup, depending on where you live. Not that I've ever been in one of those, or at least my record does not indicate that any longer. And then there's prison.
Precisely. So I would say that the garrison would have the county jail. Let's call it jail, just to separate the terms. So the garrison will include the jail, and let's have our little prison island out there.
Yeah, and for now we can just have that as a facade too. We don't have to actually go in and
very much
develop it.
Yeah.
And then that's one of those places we can expand on later if we would like to.
Mm-hmm. I can totally imagine where a player goes around or something, and I don't know if we have like a whole lot of breaking rules. Let's say, I think we were talking about nudity at some point. We run in here and they just throw you in the tank, and you have to either wait it out or figure out a way out or whatever. But then like for those that like go in and they're murdering NPCs and stuff, or they're wanted, I don't know if this is a gameplay thing, maybe I'm overreaching, but then having to escape like a thing that goes way out here or something, like that would be pretty badass for a rogue to do. If we put
the naked people in the jail, you know how many players would wind up stuffing themselves, and everybody would get naked day one and just be slammed into the tiny jail.
Yeah, that's true.
What this really is saying is if there are certain behavioral triggers that players can exhibit that kind of trigger a reaction from the guards in the city. So for example, let's say a player attacks another player, inciting PvP in a non-PvP allowed area of the city. Could they suddenly find themselves in jail? In theory, could repeat offenders be sent to prison? It all depends on whether we can actually translate that into the game mechanics, but they're really, really fun ideas to explore. Another example is what Zukan was saying earlier, right? So in terms of riding your horse in places where horses are not allowed, or mounts in general are not allowed in the city, they could wind you in jail, and you're there for some real time. You know what I mean? And things like that, for example.
we're probably so far we've discussed the idea of giving the guards the ability to see certain behaviors and warn the players before they go straight aggro, and then aggro. And for the time being, we're going to keep it simple and just have the guards kill you. But we can explore some of these more elaborate ideas and edge case them and stuff as we go.
That makes sense.
Great. So let's jump back into the exercise then, right? So we have the garrison district, technically, or Southern Dune Watch, if you will, extends from this road up here. Sorry, Harrison, can I trouble you to zoom out a bit? Yeah, from that road over there to about over here, and then includes that naval dock. So this is the civic garrison area, and this is the garrison proper area, the military area.
Yeah, and I think it's going to make sense to probably, since this is the garrison, more militaristic area, walling this. Yeah, walling that off too.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's, it's diagonal like that, or, does some sort of, little bend or shape or something like that. I can play around with those until we get something that we like.
Yep. So let's start plotting in some of the structures like we did up here.
Mm-hmm.
Sort of see how it sort of looks like, right? Because maybe it is that a case that we have too much space and we have to redefine the shoreline and make the port bigger and things like that. But the actual civic district itself is smaller, i.e. shorten this space right here. Bring it like, make this wall a bit shorter. Like say it only goes out that far, that was terrible. Sorry. Like about that far, for example, and that gate is actually over here. But again, it'll dictate the proportions of the city to us, right?
Mm-hmm.
And maybe the north side of the garrison is purely kind of like shops or residential or something like that, right?
Yeah. All right. So what are the structures that we have in here? You said there was a courthouse, a temple. So I moved the temple over here.
Perfect. And then we've got a courthouse, basically. Those are the two main civic structures that we have in there.
I'm going to just duplicate the temple as a civic courthouse. Do we have any preference on where each of these are going to go?
No, at the moment, as long as they are outside of the military zone, they're really anywhere we want them to be. Paradraw of fighters, I would say. I lean towards having that temple street side.
Street side?
Yeah, I lean towards it, but it's again very arbitrary. Like anyone could argue against it for n number of reasons.
Oops, let me bring my snapping.
And so I shall. No, I'm just no. I've got nothing to add there.
I'm gonna push it down just a little bit since we have those two right there. Granted, they might not all look the same.
Notice what we just did there, though, Harrison, right? Because we've only got two structures that are clearly defined for this district, by pushing it out there, we've just created a whole ton of negative space in the district. So it really begs the question, like maybe our sprawl can extend deeper, like say from out here to here. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah.
And this becomes our northern garrison district. So maybe we put that sort of over here or something like that, or maybe a little bit in, maybe you have to go into like, maybe there's a side road or something like that from there that takes you, but you get my point, right? By just placing this temple over here and accommodating the street, if you will, it kind of, it kind of miscommunicates the point and it creates additional problems. It's like, okay, it puts us in a situation where we now stop saying how much real space are we working with versus how do we fill up space that we've imposed on ourselves.
Right.
Yeah, makes sense.
Goes back to that sort of back and forth on scale.
Yeah, exactly. At the end of the day, like I hold to the purpose of this exercise being, what does the scale actually look like? You know what I'm saying? How big are these districts really? Can we, for argument's sake, just at the moment, say that that Northern Dune Watch is about yay big? Like the civic part of Northern Dune Watch, Southern Dune Watch is about that big. And just sort of stick that in here somewhere.
Yeah, hold on,
Yeah, just as placeholders at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, we essentially have this very, very vacant, what do you call it? Harrison, here's a question for you that's sort of related, right? So when you did your research and you kind of guesstimated or landed on the width of a main road, what do you call it, being about, you said 16 meters wide?
Yes, 16 to anywhere between 8 and 16 seemed like a pretty decent width for main roads.
Create an 8-meter road, half the size, coming down that way.
Oh wow, that was already 8 meters. I did that by eye. Normally, it does not work that well. And so just coming all the way down?
Yeah, all the way to the wall. And this is now the gate. That road now tells us that this is potentially the gate to the garrison.
Okay. Are you talking about instead of this gate? Or is it going to have two gates?
From inside the city.
Okay, that makes sense. I just wanted to make sure that we were on the same page.
So the logic that I'm following here is that roads, generally main roads and avenues tend to basically separate districts. So it's like they say, you know, like this district starts from, it sits between this road and that road. Do you see what I mean? And that's why I prompted you to create like not a main road, but like a side road that's still relevant because it separates, let's say, the Sprawl from the smaller, obviously, what do you call it, civic garrison district.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that works. Obviously, you know, this would need to be bent more, but the roads right now, for everyone who's watching, they're probably not going to be geo. They will more than likely be painted onto the surface.
Mm-hmm.
So just keep that in mind.
And here's another question. So let's go back, top down view, please.
Top down.
And yeah, and let's include the Travelers District in this. Let's kind of look at how it's all aligning, right? So we have these two main roads coming into the city, and then we have this other main road that's supposed to go into the temple, the old temple complex.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So again,
that could be a smaller road too.
You're on the same page as me exactly. You know what I'm saying? And again, if we go back to the narrative that the city was somewhat, you know, like it's the product of urban planning, let's say, maybe we could be simplistic about it, at least for the moment, until Goblin kind of starts really aesthetically playing with these things. Kind of do that. Keep them lined up for the moment. You know what I'm saying? And so therefore, we can ditch this, move these, I don't know, or maybe just have that, I don't know. But yeah, basically, like, what I'm thinking is we don't align these with the entrance itself, but kind of push them in a little bit.
That makes a lot of sense as we've moved around.
There's actually a pretty good reason why I think that would work conceptually as well when it comes to some of the layout and lore and that sort of thing.
Sorry, guys, my camera snapping is acting weird all of a sudden. As the camera is shooting around and making everybody sick, I'm sure.
Vertigo.
Right, so, man, I get some wicked vertigo. Put me inside a building and that has like stairwells or like exposed escalators. Ooh, do not like heights.
Is it strictly height, or do you FPSs give you motion sickness and stuff as well?
FPSs, not really. I get simulation sickness with VR to some degree. But it's more when if I've been playing for a long period of time, or if it's a game that has movement where I'm not moving, which I think is fairly common.
Yeah.
But I get motion sick. But the I don't get it from just like the visuals. The visuals definitely are more of like an anxiety thing. But it's also really weird because it's more, like I said, it's more man-made structures. So it's a lot of things that are like running vertically, horizontally, and diagonal lines, and then I lose the horizon, and all of a sudden feel like I'm losing my balance. And my balance isn't as good as it used to be, but I used to skateboard and snowboard, so I have decent balance. But then I can be like on the side of a cliff, like hiking, and there being 100-foot, 1,000-foot drop on the edge, and I'm climbing up it, and that doesn't bother me. So it's really, really weird, and it's one of those things like I actively know that it's really weird that it's like that, and I'm like, I don't know. The human mind and primal fears are a very interesting topic, in my opinion. But back on topic. So move those over a little bit. We don't want this aligned directly with that. So I think that solved this problem. But here's the thing, do we want a temple like was that probably like 4 to 6 meters away from a stable?
Definitely maybe.
Just definitely maybe.
Maybe.
But I could always, I guess, move this checkpoint over here.
Stable inside city gates for players?
Well, Hamad mentioned having like a stable structure with a checkpoint earlier.
It's basically the caravan inspection place, and I thought maybe a riding trainer could be over here. To be fair, let's stay anchored to the point here of trying to figure out scale. As long as the structures we have are in place.
We can play with
what we add and remove, we can play with later. Now we said that this was the bathhouse and this was the bank, right?
Bank, bathhouse.
Let's shift them over here a bit on either side of the inn's main entrance. Move them out a bit, yep.
And we move this out of the way too.
Okay, and now let's extend this road and then build a little square or a plaza here in the middle. Okay, so that this little dinky road goes through the plaza, intersects with this other main road, and leads right into the old temple complex.
Sounds good.
And let's make that plaza a little bit bigger.
Yeah, I'm going to. I'm just moving this real quick.
Rock and roll.
I wanted to see kind of where it was centered. Ooh, that's not centered.
That's okay. We can fix all of that later. Right now, let's just stay on placement, I guess. Or work your magic.
All right, so let's do that. And actually, I'm using it to kind of eyeball where the center of this is going to be, and my keyboard's being weird. So I gotta down here. You know what? I did like it better there, and what I would suggest us do is just to
move the cave entrance.
Move the cave entrance.
Make it a bit smaller as well. Yeah, why not?
Yeah. Actually, let me see what the scale on this thing is, because I think I arbitrarily just threw that in there and didn't pay attention to scale at the time. So we need to bring back that, and we'll set it to 0 or 1 and world space. So yeah, this is gigantic right now.
Mm-hmm.
So that is like a 1-story entrance.
Let's make it about 2.5.
Yeah, I was gonna say 2.5 might be a good one to start at.
And remember, Gops could always like do his thing and like, make it look really, really fancy. I mean, we have a narrative concept for that area anyway, and so it will have a very unique aesthetic. Something we'll talk about a little later, Goblin.
Oh yeah, that's we're actually gonna we're gonna cut out pretty much the entire wall. It's gonna be pretty much a valley by the time I'm done with it. I'm
cozy, Goblin, cozy.
Harrison, sorry, put a little barrier between the road and the cave entrance. So like a little, I don't know what you'd call it, but like a little space. Like if you just move the edge of the, sorry, like
All right,
this.
are you talking about this?
Yeah, so like, no. This, the actual wall, instead of it touching the road, it leaves a little bit of a space on either side.
More like that? Or
No. The width of the.
Exactly, the width of the cave.
Oh, I get what you're saying. Sorry.
Those of you just listening in, which has got to be interesting because it's very visual. I've just spammed the chat with a bunch of links. If you're new here, if you'd like to know more about our project, check the links. Linked to everybody's various streams, the mailing list, the website, the Discord, and our YouTube channel, which everybody should be subscribing to, where we've got a ton at this point of videos from our various development VODs and gameplay VODs.
I'll fix that hole.
Or streams. So.
There we go. All right, so we got that. Oops, and this is totally buried in the sand.
Yep. Now let's fudge around with the layout of that sort of in-bank, in-bank and bathhouse.
Sure.
Let's play with that just a touch. Like, do we want the inn so far back, basically?
Yeah, you're thinking exactly what I was thinking. I'm thinking this stuff moves up a little bit. Although, hold on. Let me give our road placeholder some more geo, because hold on. Losing it in the sand, and I'm trying to use it kind of as a guide for my eye. Okay, so move that over there, and then in is right here. Here's the question: do we still want the inn centered? Do we want the inn closer?
Well, remember we had that overflow as well in front of it. Is that still a thing?
Don't think so.
Maybe we could make the square a little bigger and not necessarily as a square. What I mean by that, sorry, make it a bit more rectangular.
Yeah, we can do that. If I can select it.
Yeah, something like that. So now basically like the access is not like, it doesn't look like we need a road going to the inn or something like that. It's just a square and these are the buildings surrounding the square.
Mm.
Although this should be centered more.
Mm-hmm.
That, which means this gets moved.
Makes a nice natural congregation point.
Precisely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you got your inn here, you got your bank. Nice little place to hang out.
I think the temple can benefit from moving to the right there a little bit, like that way a little bit, because the entrance, to that temple will probably be off the square. Oh, no. Sorry, I apologize for confusing you, Harrison. I mean, just a notch this way so that if it's over there, it would be on the square, facing the square.
So you're talking like that?
Yeah, something like that. Exactly. Something like that.
Actually, I think this building is elongated as well, so I think I can rotate it.
I can't wait to see what Goblin does with making these temples like visually unique.
Yeah, it'll be interesting because we can also just get in at ground level once we've got a nice sort of mock-up here, get at ground level and kind of look at the sight lines and also see what they're doing for us, right? Like, do we have those? And I know as everything comes together, there'll be more and more opportunities for that. But just sort of ensuring that there are those wonderful sight lines when people come in and out of town. And it's interesting. I've read a lot, and it makes sense, and watched a lot of videos on just those moments when, you know, people first got into WoW and went into Agramar, and we're sort of, you know, looking at the city, and how good of a job they did at presenting things.
Yeah, definitely gonna take some time to run around. I think we need to set this. I think I didn't set up the zone line correctly, so I'm going to talk to Lee or Nick, because I tried zoning a character in and it just went to a loading screen. So I'm sure the zone isn't set up properly.
Did we fix the what was it called? Was it the zone toy, or not the one that we used to actually go in, but we had another one that was allowing us to basically just run things locally. Anyway, I know Ollie was talking about it the other day, but now I'm all over the place.
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure, because I just tried to do the /zone and then Night Harbor, which I believe is what I had. I believe that's what I typed in and what I have in the database for the zone's name. And it just went to load, so I'm sure I screwed something up somewhere. And then this is floating, but that stuff I'll take care of later. Yeah. I could be nitpicking every little like unit these things are placed on stream.
You and every other artist on the planet.
I'm like fighting my artistic OCD right now.
Try cross-hatching in inks and then tell me.
Oh yeah. I love that style that you work in. I've actually wanted to get a tattoo in that style.
Thank you.
We can make that happen.
All right, let's jump back into. Can we do top down again?
Top down. Let's do a top down.
Yeah. See,
there we go.
So now we see it kind of starting to come together a little bit, right? And this is starting to speak to us in terms of scale. And you notice that we actually have so much negative space, like so much negative space to play with the existing proportions. I mean, it really kind of begs the question, can Night Harbor stand to be made smaller as a playable zone? Or alternatively, can we think up and cook up ideas on how to fill in that negative space? Do we need more districts that are not me and the creating districts? But we can do a whole bunch of stuff. But the point is that now that's a discussion that needs to be had.
Yep.
Because at the end of the day, that zone was huge on the like in the abstract, right? But look at how small it really is and how much it can still benefit from being filled out. The garrison district, look how tiny it became in reality, and this is still too much. It's like 2/3 negative space.
And remember, for comparison, that's the old zone right there. So I mean, we've moved the gate back just a bit. So here's the old gate.
Yeah.
So there's now kind of that little indent in it. But yeah, I mean, we're just getting to the marketplace right now.
Yeah. I've already got ideas for what we can do over here, and this could potentially play off some ideas from what we call the park district over there. Okay. Before I jump into that, Harrison, do you want to start at least blocking out the walls in the military zone for where the respective areas are?
Yeah, let's do that.
Let's do that first, and then I'll talk about what we can do over here, because I think that's where we can slot in our theater, where the bards are, and the night market and things like that. It's already lending itself for that kind of positioning. Let's explore that in a bit.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, on the negative space topic, I think the points that I would just reiterate are, when we hit a district where the sprawl is appropriate, the amount of just sort of either player housing potentially, suitable buildings, some empties to convey, and then scale down where possible. I would say given the amount of variety and sort of, I think, the ambition that we're already expressing in the overall design, I would say before we add anything, I would shrink, lock down the rest of the districts and sort of everything else that we want to do, and sort of see if that lines up, or flag for shrinking, lock down the rest of the districts, because we may find that, oh, we got to shrink these districts, but all of a sudden Salt Breeze really starts to blow out or whatever. Right. And then come back for another pass, because I'm always going to be cautioning my concern of, the eyes being bigger than the stomach when we start to go in and start concepting and trying to then apply detail in here, because we've already got a ton, and this is just a chunk of what we're doing for POC.
Yeah.
Exactly.
One of the things that I think also comes into this sort of situation, I mean, is like, especially with that negative space part. Ham, you had actually mentioned having some sort of, let's say, urban fight zones or urban spawn zones and stuff like that, where that could really fit, where it's like, okay, like maybe the backyard of some place, or the has like a bunch of rats or something that needs to be taken care of, and that's where that mob lives, or something like that. So having more space to utilize basically all those elements, from player housing to possibly this urban city fighting area for lower or high levels and stuff like that, I think needs. Well, it's going to be exciting to put things in and see how they work and everything as well.
Absolutely agreed. So I want to address that on two levels, actually. So one, we've already pre-designated areas that act as urban environments, but the idea of negative space in the city serving as potentially micro urban environments where players can engage with, grindable mobs, or just, like PvE encounters, let's call them, things like a cut purse or something like that. Doesn't even have to be right, but it could actually be a humanoid or whatever, and if the cops catch you, you can get busted for it, and all that interesting kind of stuff. It's well and good. That's well and good. That's always kind of there. My main concern, which is the second point that I wanted to come to, is that at this stage in time, what I would like to see is what does Night Harbor look like with all the bare bone essentials that we've identified on our abstract zoning map laid in, so that now we could start figuring out how do we make the terrain bring all of that together and address topography that way, and then say, all right, now what do we do with the negative space? Do you see what I mean? And it's kind of like to work it systematically as opposed to haphazardly, right? So that's kind of the approach that I'm trying to take with this exercise, without precluding the points that you've actually made, because I think that they're wonderful. We want to do them. I think they're a little premature just now, because can we have such a thing as too many urban wildernesses in the zone, right? And the answer has to be a hard yes at some point.
Yes, I would totally agree on that one.
Yeah.
So we have to be mindful of that, and the only way we'd be able to gauge that sensibly is when the bare bone essentials have been locked in. Like, I'll point out something right now. I won't interrupt what Harrison's doing, but you can see in the background here what's meant to be the escarpment, and then the Alderman's Rise, and then potentially the Great Guild Hall up there, you know what I'm saying, and things like that. But we just looked at the cave scale, the old temple complex scale, and we realized that
exactly.
So this is already huge. We know that this may potentially need to be shrunk down, but if we shrink it down, do we get that epic view that we wanted, right? So how do we compensate for that? Well, the answer is in topography. You turn this into an escarpment, you have maybe a few added layers. Maybe it's not a 3-tier city, maybe it's a 7-tier city or something like that, with the tiers being dispersed around the city. So those are prerequisite conversations that we need to set ourselves up to have before deciding how do we fill in the negative space. It may very well be that the stretch from like here all the way down to here, right? Like, it just may be that we need to contract this a little bit. Night Harbor needs to be a little bit smaller. You know what I'm saying? In terms of its scale. It could be the case. We don't know yet, but we only will know once we've actually put everything down and see how much we have to play with.
Yeah, and I was. Go ahead, sorry, Ham. I thought you were.
No, sorry. I was concluding the point. It's let's lay everything down. That's number one. Number two, let's address topography as an enhancing element for those things that we've laid down. And three, then figure out basically scaling of the city. Do we need to shrink it down, make it narrower, make it wider, whatever it might be? And then lastly, what do we do with negative space? And also addressing other things like the residences, natural boundaries between the districts, et cetera, and so forth. Are they going to be empty houses? Are these houses, what does it mean for a player to have a residence? You know what I'm saying? And who do they need to interact with to be able to get one? Those become important questions, but they are later day questions.
Yeah, Ali and me have talked about some of that a little bit a week or so ago. But I know a lot, Ali was saying to leave a lot of the kind of sprawly type ones just empty in terms of what's in them, which I think was already kind of a plan anyways. Excuse me. But yeah, just leaving them empty so, players can populate them as they get them. And in terms of negative space, I wasn't really going to focus on the negative space right now anyways. I did a little bit up here, but that was just to see how large the scale was and what we could get away with visually in certain spaces. I didn't know how. I thought this was going to be a little bit tighter than it was, and then I started throwing some buildings in there, and I was like, wow, we got a lot of space here.
Yep.
But yeah, that was just kind of a mini experiment. But my plan is once we have all the major structures in, that's when I'll go in and kind of freestyle a lot of those sprawly type areas. I think those areas will come together pretty easily that way.
And I think when I sit here and kind of rework the topography as well, that'll help a lot as well to facilitate the sprawl. So essentially, you're going to have physical foundations from which the buildings can protrude from. They can be that the buildings can be actually set on. And the benchmark for that, or the litmus test for whether that works or not, is that zoom out view we have of the city. When we actually go all the way out across shaded dunes and look at the city, have we hit all those kind of those beautiful, epic, piers that we wanted to have, you know what I'm saying? That and hit that scale correctly. And we'll get there. But let's take it one step at a time and start plunking down the bare essentials. That's me using my favorite word again. And then figure out what kind of space we have to work with.
Sounds good to me.
Cool.
Awesome. So where are we at? We were going to put in
populating. Yes.
Yeah, we were playing around over here. So I brought the giant shape back. Well, maybe not exactly how it was, but and this is probably still gigantic.
Yeah, it is kind of huge. But let's cut out our marshalling courtyard first of all, and feel free to give that some space as well. You have room to. Oh, this is the marshalling courtyard. Excuse me. This is technically it, right?
Yep, right here is what I was thinking.
Yeah.
And then
we can get rid of it and make it more kind of like cobblestoney or
I'll do that with the texture for the most part. Throwing in extra geo here is just going to get in the way.
Yeah.
But so what I'm going to do. So what did we have over here? We had an archery range.
We had the archery range is here in the courtyard, but what we had here, well, technically we could make that courtyard a little bit. It could stand to be a bit bigger because let's assume that this is where they marshal, where from the stables the horses kind of ride out to range out into the shaded dunes and things like that. The rangers do their thing, and over here is where the warriors kind of train in their martial sort of skills, right? So you got the archers doing their thing over here, facing that way maybe, and you got the warriors training and each other senseless, which is how I make scrambled eggs. But what do you call it? And then you got the stables barricading that area over here. And feel free to stretch the stables out a little bit as well.
Yeah. So let's bring.
I somehow turned my headphones all the way down. I have no idea how I did it, and it was just like, how the hell did I just break everything? But I could see you guys were still talking in Streamlabs, so I was like, all right, I didn't break the stream. Thank God.
Okay. Stables. You said. Are you thinking facing this way, or are they running running this way and facing that way?
Yeah, exactly. Running this way and facing that way.
All right, that makes more sense to me as well.
It seems to me that given the scale of the stable now, because you used the same stable that we used earlier on, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, given that.
No,
scale,
this is only like 1 story high. Obviously, you know, the military one potentially could be, you know, more grand, I guess.
Or just the courtyard could be walled behind the stables. And we can add, you know, like a barracks as well. So it's like the place where the guards actually sleep and, you know, things like that, and maybe even a potential communal area for them.
Do you see these running all the way to this wall?
I think that the courtyard should be cordoned off from the naval dock, maybe accessible via a gate. And my answers are really, really arbitrary, though, right?
Yeah, that's completely fine by me.
As placeholders just for the moment, and I think, like, you know, this is a district that, again, when we get to the concept art stage, you know, it's like, okay, well, how's it actually laid out and what does it look like? You know, maybe Gobs can throw in some ideas, and I think it's a worthy topic to have a group discussion on, because everyone's got so many like kick-ass ideas. What do you call it? That we can do that, but you know, it's a good problem to have, because at that point we're kind of like, okay, we know what needs to be there, now how do we lay it out in a fun way that our players can actually enjoy, you know? And that's a great problem to have. At this point, let's just plop everything in there and just sort of see what happens.
All right, so we'll call that. There's going to be all sorts of geo issues over here. Like I said, this was not really touched on.
No sweat.
If we need to remind you to not sweat it, we will. It's like, stop.
Yeah, you'll probably be doing that, because I'm going to start going, oh, that's not right. That's not right.
That gives you plenty to do on your stream.
Yep. Stop selecting that. Okay, so we got that. So here's the courtyard. This area essentially would be our the fighting area.
So if you give me a top down view, I'll sort of demarcate this area, right? So you've got our stables. The rangers kind of ride out and come out this way. Well, through the gate here. Sorry, that was terrible. Okay, so we've got warriors training over here, or fighters training over here, and archers training over here. Okay, so I think like the archery range would like be lined up against this wall, and the archers are kind of shooting like that way, or doing whatever it is that they do. Maybe this wall also includes like an entry into the garrison or what have you, where the soldiers can kind of, you know, marshal and run out to defend the city if they have to, or run out that way to defend the city if they have to. No, they're going to be defending the city walls, right? So we'll probably need some kind of staircase or something that leads onto the city walls. Like,
I was just thinking about that. I was like, do we want stairs over here? Because if we don't, this might actually be a good area for the archery range, just a little narrow area right to here.
Yeah.
Or another thing, I'm just trying to also think about where the fighters, because the fighters right now, granted, you know, this is all representational art. The stables are blocked if we fence in this area. Granted, that's, you know, this area doesn't even have to be fenced in.
That's true. Also, like I think the
would just be a couple training dummies that are like, you know.
Yeah. And this is sufficient for the stables, to be honest with you. Like, this can open up into the rest of the area, because remember, it's all cordoned off over here as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
The idea is, I think it's more important to focus on the defenses of the city and the city walls being able to get populated by soldiers and archers and things like that. So, you know, ramparts, battlements, stairs leading up to them, and things like that. That's all going to be part of the design, so to speak.
Yeah. So I guess for my brain wants to know. So obviously we have this entrance in, right? And we have probably an entryway into the actual like garrison main fortification right here, like the keep. We have a entrance in from the city, which they could be using to attack, and they can come in and out of the docks here when the chain is not up. We potentially have talked about some of these almost having that submarine pen where you kind of go into the fortification, but that takes off if we do that. That's how these people that I get on here could get into the fortification. How about the ones that are docking here? Are we going to have them enter on a lower level over here, or is it going to be them going up a pathway? And then there needs to be some sort of miniature fortification wall where this, like on the other side of this stable.
Okay, again, subjectively speaking, I think there should be kind of like a land access to appear, like this is laid out right here. Like that should be there anyway. They have to be able to do that. And I think that this area can actually benefit from a little sort of like elevation, and the garrison kind of built on top of it. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? So that elevation, if you create like a micro escarpment over here, right? Like remember those reference photos we were looking at the other day of how those cliffs rise up and then the buildings kind of blend right into them, like the sides of the building blend perfectly with the cliff face or what have you. So maybe this can be in a slightly elevated area, and the garrison kind of sits on top of it. But having that escarpment allows you to have underwater docks for your underwater, not underwater. What I mean is inland.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
Listen to what I'm thinking, not what I'm saying, right?
Yeah, exactly.
My mouth betrays me. But yeah, that's kind of the idea. So maybe it's like, the westward docks are kind of internal, whereas the northward docks, these ones, are kind of just ground level. Mm-hmm. Something along those.
This is the big thing that I'll need to figure out is, obviously, I was thinking the same thing. The terrain can be built up over here.
Yeah.
And then, if I'm looking at, here's the dock at water level. Here's a boat sitting in it. Sorry, everybody, Slack is not always the best for drawing.
Sometimes.
And then, here's our entrance for said dock. And it goes up. The rest of this little area that's going up, if that's what we do, the rest of this next to it can all be, craggy rocks that it's sitting on, and it's just got this little tiny area that's kind of
even
fortifications. Or that could
wave breakers, you know what I'm saying? Things like that. Like there's loads of little interesting things you can add into the seascape to make it sort of more visually appealing, right? But again, that's something we can kind of discuss. Not that is basically aesthetics as opposed to functional layout.
Yeah. Yeah. My big thing is just how. Okay, so this is a gateway. Are we blocking off this area, or do we want to keep it open? I guess that's my biggest question.
Definitely, maybe. Maybe we can have another wall like over there with leading into that courtyard kind of thing, So it's separated internally. Everybody knows this is where they train.
Yeah, that's where I'm leaning toward. What I'm leaning towards too.
And this is like a side entrance to the garrison, but the main entrance is like over here somewhere. You know what I'm saying? So like people being dragged to jail would go through this gate essentially and taken to the little jail down there. And this is kind of like more the functional area of the garrison, where you have the respective guilds, basically, of the martial classes that are represented in that building.
Yeah. Okay. I think that was enough for my mind to kind of really understand what we're going to do with all of
Feel
this.
free to unravel all of this and rehash it if you want, and then it's probably going to end up getting rehashed again when Gobs gets his mitts on it as well, right? And starts thinking like, okay, how can I make this area look really effing cool? And that's inevitable. But yeah, I think like one single large structure to kind of represent the three class guild functions and the jail is sufficient. You know what I'm saying? We probably want to also make an allowance. You know what I should probably do? For big structures like this, I should probably put down a tentative list of, let's call them functional areas inside and share that with the team. So like I imagine that this garrison, it's got the fighters guild function, it's got the archers and the rangers as well. We've already established the training grounds and the stables and things like that. We mentioned the jail. We probably need a barracks in there, maybe an armory, maybe a what do you call it, a canteen of some kind, or like and a quartermaster's sort of area as well, stuff like that. Maybe there's a small shrine to Haradral. In fact, maybe the temple to the warrior god is not on the street side, but is actually like over here somewhere, just outside the garrison. Maybe it's closer to where most of its worshippers would benefit from it. These are all considerations. Well, not over there rather, but over here on this side to again maintain the civic district, right? And then the what do you call it? The court is kind of like over here, and maybe there's a back door or something like that. You know what I'm saying? Like a little I forget what you call them. Those little doors in the walls. But what do you call it, where the prisoners are kind of let in from, or maybe they come in through the main gate? I don't know, like stuff like that. Again, that's aesthetics, right? In terms of like the layout, I believe we've hit everything square on the head right now.
Yeah, I can't think of anything else that like my brain is like, I need this to be able to understand what I'm doing. Cool.
Harrison, can you do me a favor for my own sort of OCD? Can you clip this road? Like, can you just get rid of it?
Yep. If I could target. Sometimes the selection with Pro Builder leaves.
Well, okay. Sorry, Harrison. What I meant is not the entire road, because that road's still an important landmark, but I mean like from about here, that way, just that section of it.
Oh, okay. I get what you're saying. Oh my gosh. Like that?
Yeah, something like that. Maybe stretch it back a little bit more, line it up with these, I think, like that till there.
Hold
just for argument's sake, I'm
gonna have to delete stuff for that, or I'm gonna be moving a ton of stuff.
Cool.
Oops. Helps if I select. There's so much stuff in this level already, or this zone. What? That's the first time I've seen Pro Builder do that.
Interesting. It just popped that face off?
Yeah, it popped the face off. I moved it back and it's stuck on. That's the first time I've seen it do that. That was weird.
While you're doing that, Spiegel, you just said something in chat. And so that reminds me, Scorpion, Spiegel, Digital Habitat, Zombex, Selcopa, Hills Ridge, thank you for the follows. Didn't want to interrupt the flow earlier, but appreciate you being here.
Cool. So is that kind of where you wanted it, Ham?
Yeah. Again, just representationally, because I wanted to jump into kind of this area here now. Okay, which is this section right there.
Okay.
And okay, this kind of deviates a little bit from the narrative on the abstract, but please indulge me. Okay, so the park district had both the park proper, which Harrison has already kindly kind of walled off. over here, right? But then there were these other areas of interest in the park, and I'm thinking of like maybe trying to deploy them here right now. And the reason I'm thinking of putting them here is because they are not elevation centric, number one, and two, we want kind of like the elevations of the city to start from about this area onwards. Okay, so just for purposes of today's exercise, I want to experiment with this, and again, like we can totally, you know, do away with this if it doesn't make sense later. But suggestively speaking, this is where I imagine we could have the theater, which is where the Bards Guild function would be, and the night market.
Okay. Are we thinking this is an outdoors like stage, or are we thinking this like an amphitheater?
What I'm thinking more specifically is, in fact, this might be interesting. Harrison, sorry, move that, or ignore that building rather. Is there a way to take the ground over here and lift it up just a touch so that it comes to about the height of that building?
That one right there?
This one. Yeah, till not its whole height, but till that point. So not too high off the ground, right?
It's actually lower than that point.
Oh, is it? Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, no, that's fine. Just a little bit of elevation there.
Let me grab these edges. Or actually the vertices. There we go. Is that better?
Yep. Now lift it up, lift the rest of the ground over here up to match it and kind of flatten it out. Yeah, keep going, like all the way back to the wall over here.
Oh.
Like to about here, you know, where it meets the tower kind of thing, or the gatehouse rather. Okay.
So more like that?
Something like that, exactly. And in terms of how far this way it goes, sorry, can you give me a top-up view again? Bring it out to about plus or minus approximately here.
Hold on. Oh, sometimes the selection in this is not 100% ideal.
One by one.
Basically.
They don't have like the sort of paint select.
It's gonna be one of those things I'm gonna have to dig through tutorials to see if they have that, because I have not found it myself, and I don't think it's listed in shrink select, grow select, loop select, material select. Yeah, it doesn't say anything about like paint selecting.
Okay.
There we go.
There we go. So this is part of our rocky outcroppings, right? So the texture of this area should match our mountains up here. All right. So these are the rocky outcroppings, or and I'm sure you guys know what I'm referring to, but Night Harbor's foundation. All right. That should be reflected into the textures of this area. And this little elevation is a point of interest because it's not only separated by roads, but by natural topography, and it contains this large sort of area where people come to be entertained. So there's this nice big theater over here. It doesn't have to be in proportion to my little dinky drawing or what have you. And you've got the night market overlooking the town. These fortifications will probably rise up higher to match it defensively. This is also an elevation, but it's actually going down to take you to sea level, essentially, where the harbor is. and this is an elevated area that takes you to the harbor waterfront district. Make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it makes sense to me.
So you see where these dotted lines are, Harrison? If we can lift these up just a little bit so that they're a bit more level, you know, they create a bit of a sort of drop. You know what I'm saying?
Hold it. Like, so you want
the road here should not go like that. You see if the road extends that way? From the road, it should be a bit more like that and then drop.
Okay, so you're talking like around here, and then it has
the sides of the road. Exactly, the sides of the road. Precisely.
Hold on. Let's see if I can get an angle on this so I can do an easy selection. Oh, not so much. This is the problem with using polybrush.
So for those of you wondering why I'm putting Harrison through all this pain, it's this is really an experiment. It's only slightly tangential to what we're trying to achieve from this exercise, but I want to work with elevations a little bit without going into multi-tiered, complicated elevations. Just something very, very simple that can start adding that tiering effect to Night Harbor without sort of overwhelming us at the same time. And staying true to some of the district distribution. It's interesting how already some things are changing on the fly as we're starting to look at the space.
I need to figure out if I can use like the flatten tool and stuff on this, because that would make my life a lot easier. Okay, so more like that, where it's kind of a bank, or are you talking like a steeper drop off?
No, you've hit it. You've hit it. So it's more like a bank, maybe steeper in some areas, Harrison. But that's for right now. As long as the elevation's represented, we're kind of okay.
Yeah.
So, but do you see how now, like the harbor district, the waterfront is elevated versus the harbor, which sits at sea level?
Yep. So you got
exactly. That was kind of the point of this
now do we want, here's the question now, do we want this to do that, or do we want this all to do that?
I think this, okay, top down view again, please.
Let me turn that off.
So inevitably what happens here is we have a depressed park, right? It's got the winter blues. No, okay, sorry, that's terrible. Terrible.
I'm glad you did it. Because I was about to chime in with something along those lines, and I feel like I'm always that dude.
But my point is that now, if we start looking at this structure, this terrace over here, as thematically again textured like our mountains, and it's an escarpment. One, it can stand to be a little bit lower or tiered, which means that we can actually start to drag it so it wraps around the park. Hold on, let these just fade out for a little bit, and I'll show you what I mean. I would say, one, keep your walls. They're absolutely brilliant. Okay? Two, around the general shape of the escarpment kind of goes like that. You know what I'm saying? So it kind of elevates that way. And then you've got this gentle sort of slope to the escarpments up. Do you see what I mean?
Yep.
So it would look something like that. You don't have to do this now, Harrison, at all, but I'm just sort of walking you through my thinking. But my point is that as long as we leave some space, so the escarpment here obstructs the north side of this road, which means we could plop stuff over here. We can have more stuff over here. You know, it's up to us. But that would be, this is an example of where I'd be playing with the topography of this place again, right? As opposed to having like this look like it's a structure. We want to make it look like it's terrain.
Yeah, no, that's totally doable. So this whole lower section is, you're saying don't think of it as constructed by people at all. It's purely like a mesa top.
Correct.
Because in my mind, I was thinking that like the bottom half in portions, maybe even higher up in other portions, like right here, would be
the
foundational, and then the other top was going to be, you know, the top part was going to be like brick and whatever.
So So the response to that is the bottom part, foundational, that's as it should be. That's exactly what it's meant to be, right? But think about the effects of erosion over millennia, right? So it ends up, the rest of it ends up mirroring this.
Yep.
You get me? And that's kind of the idea. And also, now I'm going to sort of do your head in a little bit here, Harrison, right? So from the boundary of the park over here, all right, from these walls, so to speak, right, that you've got outlined over here, what I want you to do is lift this terrain up so it comes to approximately either 1/3 to 1/2 of the way up this escarpment.
So you're talking about, oops, I have my, so you're basically talking about leveling this out.
I'm talking about raising this up.
I was saying leveling this right here to this plane that I have right here, essentially.
And in the meantime, from here, I want you to cut me out a tunnel. Not a tunnel, this is going to be open air, but it leads to our necropolis. So our necropolis is going to go like that. And that elevation that I just hinted at over here, and this slightly raised thing, that's going to come up, obscuring the necropolis from anyone looking at it from that way, but it's going to have bridges that lead over it so people can get to this area. You follow? So the necropolis stays exactly where it is, but the necropolis's level is with that of the depressed park.
Darn it.
So we need to sink that down a little bit more.
You know what? Actually, the easier way to do this is probably just grow that, and then just select these other spots. Maybe not that spot. This is probably going to break the terrain for a moment. If the screen starts flashing black, I apologize.
Quick question, Harrison.
Mm-hmm.
When was the last time you hit save?
Good question. There we go.
Okay.
2 seconds ago.
We need a save command on chat where people can just do !save, remind us.
I should make that a thing on mine too.
I looked up, it was like session length 3 hours 21 minutes. Wait a second.
Oh wow, it's already 5:30 here. I'm gonna have to get going in a few minutes.
Yeah, I was about to say it's past my bedtime as well. Fortunately, Jasmine had a work dinner, so she's just getting home. I need a snack on something before I go to bed. I've dreaded the idea of like stopping the flow on this, but it's a great session. So
yeah, definitely,
folks, you get a glimpse of sort of the behind the scenes of how we operate. We'll definitely be doing more of this. It's a lot of fun doing it with you, and again, in the interests of transparency and trying to make this project not just about making a really cool game for all of us, but also having it be a bit of an opportunity to, learn about our process and be a part of it. Kind of a fun mix, right?
Harrison,
awesome. Before we end, is this kind of more what you're talking about?
Kind of. I just want to leave you with some thoughts over here. So this mesa does not extend all the way to here. It's actually broken up. So it goes down to about there. And then over here, we have this cutout area where like it creates this sheer cliff essentially over there. And this has a sheer cliff over here. And level with the park is basically the necropolis. So the necropolis is kind of tucked into these ruins that are up here. So if you go elevate the camera a little bit.
Give me 1 second. Oh, Unity's doing its thing. Hold on a second. Sure. There we go.
Oh my god. Wouldn't it be amazing if it crashed just now?
Oh.
That would... Here's the thing. Hollow out that area.
Now, are you talking hollow it out as in going through this tunnel? Or are you talking about this is open to air?
This is open to air.
Okay.
Like this area here is open to air, and that's the boundary of our necropolis. So this is just an escarpment that juts out. You know what I'm saying? Like over to here, this is kind of like open, and then you have another escarpment that continues the same elevation, and there's this crevasse basically between them that leads to the necropolis, but the necropolis's level is essentially the same as the parks.
Okay, so you're seeing it almost as this is all rock in the green area that I'm drawing, and then over here is also a rocky outcropping, and we aren't able to walk over here?
We are. We want the tanneries to have basically a path that leads up this escarpment, and then where this escarpment is separated from this one, we have like a bridge spanning.
Oh, okay.
You get me?
Yeah, I was just, my brain was like, how do we get over here? Besides, going around the back end.
Yeah, it's like you have to go into the park and around the back. Yeah, exactly. No.
Yeah.
Is that it's just an elevated area, and if you really want to get clever with it somehow, if you can make this tiered, that would be even better and better.
Yeah. Well, eventually, I think a lot of these rocks, like right now, oh my gosh, I keep having the drawing thing on. And now I'm probably double talking to you guys. Sorry, I unmuted myself. But anyways, the rocks here are all super placeholdery pro builder ones. A lot of the cliffs and stuff I'm going to construct out of I'm going to make a series of cliff meshes that I'll kind of use to make the cliffs. I think that's just going to work better for us.
Sure.
But yeah, so let me save this again before Unity crashes. And then I'm going to have to get going because I'm surprised my kids have not been pounding on the door.
Oh, yeah. Awkward pause, sorry.
You fine?
Yeah, man. I think it's great timing. We wrap this up, and what I'll do is I'll go back through and I'll get this up on YouTube ASAP tomorrow. I'll start it downloading as soon as we're done here. And yeah, this is a great session. So what we can do is we can have a little after action review tomorrow maybe and talk about how we felt it went and stuff, and then we can talk about potentially doing more of these in the future.
Yeah. I'm totally up for kind of working through the process on streams if people enjoyed it.
I'd totally be down to also do this sort of thing with the paint overs as well, so people can see basically the full pipeline of what we're expecting to do.
Absolutely. And I'm going to send so in chat, I'm posting the links to everybody's stream again because, everybody's streaming as well. So be sure to check out their streams. If you give them a follow now, then you'll get hopefully that notification if you've got it on later. And if you miss any of the streams, we try to get them up as quickly as possible to our YouTube. Plenty of content there. Again, join us in Discord. Nick said we're at like 700, which is amazing. And our mailing list just hit 1,111. So sign up for that if you want to learn more about the project sort of as we go, be a part of our surveys, get our updates, eventually maybe even get a little playtest invites and stuff. Yeah, I think that covers it. And it's this is who we are, Monsters and Memories. That is our website. King Up 2020, thanks for the follow. Cool.
If there's one thing that I would say is and I think this is super important, is like if you like seeing this game, like tell your friends about it. That's like word of mouth is so huge and it's so worth it.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you guys want to see,
and also, sorry, Ham, go ahead.
Sorry about that, Harrison. If you guys want to see like a shameless plug I did for Monsters and Memories, please check out also the Pickled Dragons website on YouTube, where I talk a lot about my tabletop gaming experience here in Bahrain. If you're just interested in hearing about sort of what role-playing games are like sort of in the Middle East and things like that, you'll get some insight. But I did a lot of shameless plugging for M&M in that one. So to the beginning and the end. I don't know if you guys want to skip the entire middle part, but yeah, it's kind of it's in there as well if you guys want to take a look at it. It'll give you an insight a little bit into my own background and what I how I approach contributing to projects like this.
Awesome, Harrison.
Oh, I was just saying I know from my point of view, and I think I speak for most of the team, or all the team, seeing the organic growth and the word of mouth get around definitely is motivating to continue with all that, diving in and investing extra time into it. So I was just agreeing with Goblin.
Yeah. It's super huge. We thank all of you. Yeah, because this has all just been word of mouth so far. We haven't gone out of our way to really start pushing the project. And that will eventually come, but it's amazing to see the community grow even before then. So, yep. All right, guys. Want to wrap it up?
Take care, everybody.
Take care.
Cool. See you guys. Goblin's doodling. I will basically. Bye, Goblin. Let me see. Minimize this, and yeah.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Cool. So I will bounce out of Discord and do my usual thing of thanking everybody for being here and saying good night. Salamber, thank you for the follow. Titan Uprising, thank you for the follow. K Sims, you're very welcome. Good night, Nick. Night Ham, night Aaron, night Jonathan and Beaver and Regis and Goblin. Titan Uprising, keep powering through the assembly class. Keep tuning in here. It'll get better. Imspiegel, thank you for the follow again. Glad you're here. Shakama, good night. Again, if you folks are new here, check out some of the previous videos. You'll get to hear our music. You'll get to see our gameplay. You'll get to see how far along we are. Go through the website. Look at the FAQs. Yeah. All right. I think that wraps it up. Shaka, I'm leaving you for today. I'll be back on here doing my normal stream tomorrow night. And everybody have a great evening. Unless you're here in Europe with me, then have a good night. And I will see you tomorrow.